What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1472 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, the best baseball in the city, outside the Dome. Join me May 12 at 2 p.m. Me, Brunt, Pakin, Emmett, Rod Black's mustache. We're all going to be there. Wendell Clark. Don't miss it. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 6 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning Moneris podcast hosted by FOTML Grego and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, returning to Toronto Mic'd for his exit interview is Scot Turner.
Exit interview. I like that.
Scot Turner, I'm just looking at you right now. You're getting younger. I told you this.
No.
I think you're a young-looking guy. Would you disclose your age, or is that a top secret?
Yeah, 64. Just turned 64.
Just like the song says.
Just like the Beatles song. And you just got your haircut. Yeah.
Yesterday night. Yeah.
Looking good.
FOTM Andy the barber. I was doing an experiment. So you've got the longer hair. I didn't I just wanted to grow it for a few months and see what happens. And it turns out what happens is it's a lot. It's very thick. And
you got this great thick hair. When I come
really
back in
thick.
my next life, I'm coming back with thick hair because I got that receding hairline thing, right? Even though I have some long hair, it's the receding hairline thing,
But it's better than losing it all. You're holding onto the... Well, you know who... It's Hulk Hogan style. You don't look like Hulk, but he did the hair was long, but it was high forehead.
All right.
But you look much better than Hulk Hogan. I don't want to... But Scott, what I'm saying is you're too young to retire, okay? So here's what we're going to do.
All right.
I'm going to let the listeners know about previous Scot Turner episodes, because this is your 5th visit.
See, it's funny. I was going to ask that because I just watched Saturday Night Live the other week, and it was who was it? There was the getting the 5
Was it Ryan
year.
Gosling? No.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
he was on it the previous week. Then he was on last week
Okay.
anyway. But they get these jackets when they've hosted X number of times.
So this
it's
is
quite funny.
If I had a jacket, that's the tradition. I remember when I think it was Tom Hanks got it, and then you have other members of the 5-Timer Club, and they're there for the jacket presentation. It's pretty special. But your first visit, this was a significant episode for me because I didn't know what I was doing at first, and it took me several dozen episodes to figure out what Toronto Mic'd was. But I had figured it out by the time we hit the triple digits. And I knew I wanted you to be my guest for episode 102.
Yeah, it was an honor, sir. Thank you.
Well, you know who wanted that, right? Strombo wanted 102. And he ended up with 103 because I said to Strombo, I said, you might be Canada's boyfriend. I said, but I have promised 102 to Scot Turner. So you will be 103. And then we kind of massaged it and made it 102.1 because it came after you. Yeah. But you were 102, and that was December 2014. That was almost 10 years ago.
2014. Wow. Yeah.
So we've been in each other's lives
That's
for a
cool.
decade now. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Here's what I wrote at the time. Mike chats with Spirit of Radio Sunday host.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Is it coming back in some form? Not with you, unfortunately, because that would be great. But I actually think there might be a new Spirit of Radio type program coming to CFNY on 102.1. But okay.
Don't know about that. I mean, there's NY The Spirit, which David Morrison's doing. Of course, nythespirit.com should give that a plug. Sure. But I'm not aware of that. It's interesting.
I think I heard a rumor about that. I have to dig into that. But we also talked about your many years on CFNY and Energy 108. Mm-hmm. What's next for Spirit of Radio Sunday on Edge 102? It turns out what was next was to cancel it.
Yeah. That's right. It was short-lived. I think it maybe a year. Right.
It was too beautiful for this world we live in. But if I remember correctly, you told me, and maybe you'll say it again, but it had high rate. There were a lot of listeners.
Yeah, so this is the thing. And sometimes the way you break down ratings, you can make it, you can spin it any way you want. But so there's total listeners, that's everybody 12 years of age and older. That's
Right.
one way they do it.
Right.
But then they do for selling it, they break it down into demographics. And there's this classic demographic in radio that's still there today, that it was there for many years, was the advertisers. Most advertisers want 25 to 54-year-olds, or there's also 18-34-year-old, which we'll get to the point in a second here.
Sure.
And 25.
Take your time. It took you 6 hours to get here.
Well, yeah. So, I was sorry about the traffic. So, 25, 54 advertisers, especially the big ones, from the McDonald's to, Canadian Tire to, big department stores, things like that.
Right.
They want 25, 54 because it's a period of time in people's lives where they spend a lot of money and they're not afraid to run up credit card bills and debt and that, because people argue, well, people over 54 have lots of money. Yes, they do, but they tend not to spend it as much, right?
They're smarter with their money.
Right?
Maybe.
So they want this 25, 54, you're buying
They
cars.
want dumb people with
Yes.
credit at their disposal.
Yes.
Perfect.
So that's a very attractive age. And what was unfortunate about the Spirit of Radio Sunday is that we were actually doing very, very well with 25, 54. Right? Because there was a little bit of an older audience.
And I was in that demo at the time, and I was listening.
Okay, yes. So the problem was there was
Not that I had a device. But.
but the ratings for 1834, which is really the target of the station, 1834.
Right.
Those numbers were not great. And there was a big argument, well, what's wrong with the, just having 25, 54 numbers on the Sunday? And in the end, they're going, you know what, we're really not focusing on who
Which makes
who our
sense,
audience
right?
is. Yeah.
It's like if you had Mojo Radio, right? And then there was some special show which it turned out like all the listeners are women or whatever, but all our advertisers are trying to get dudes. Like that was the whole point of Mojo, right? Like it's sort of like, in fact, I had this chat, the program director at The Rock in Oshawa, shout out to The Rock. I wanted to know, why did you cancel David Marsden's show? So the first mention of David Marsden.
Right.
And it was a similar rationale, which was that it didn't fit the rest of the week. Like all week you sounded one way, playing Monster Truck or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you have Marsden playing what he wants and doing his Mars Bar thing, which is great. And you can go to nythespirit.com, of course, like you mentioned. There's going to be a few mentions of Marsden in this episode. But same argument, which is that it's great, but wrong demo.
Yeah. Now, that's a good argument. I would also argue against that because I believe in specialty shows, and I also believe that weekends are, generally speaking, different for most people. People's habits are a little bit different on the weekends, so I think you just cut it a little bit of slack, and I think you can be a little more adventurous on the weekends. That's just my view.
I'm going to burn through the next three because I'm going to find out why, how, what's going on. Scot Turner retired. Like when Ivor Hamilton retired, he came over for his exit interview. Now, how much older is Ivor than you? Is that?
I think we're around the same age.
Okay, so Ivor presents as an older guy. Can I say that? Like
really?
I think not
you
because
hear that, Ivor?
No, but I hope so. Not because Ivor looks older, but because you look so young. Like you present so young. My opinion. Okay, you probably
nice of you.
just biked 100 clicks. We'll get to that later. But so Ivor, it seems like he's served his time. It's time to enjoy retirement, and I've seen his pictures on Facebook. He is thoroughly enjoying retirement.
Totally.
Who is the woman? Am I allowed to ask that, or is that an Ivor question?
You know, it's they have known each other for a while. I don't know a lot about the woman, and now I even forget her name. But he has known her for a while, and has I think I can probably let it out that he has recently gone back down there to see her. And
I've seen the photos.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not Ivor he's a single guy, right? And he's got an attractive woman. I think she lives in South America. Mm-hmm. And I've seen photos of them together. And I'm like living precariously through Ivor Hamilton because he seems to be living his best life in retirement.
Agreed. And I think, what the problem with the word, I think it's just the problem with the word retirement. It seems like an old term. We need a new term for retirement. Somebody come up with a new term, please, because it just doesn't seem to fit. And I think, when you talk to Ivor, if I could speak for Ivor, he would say, well,
of course you can speak for Ivor.
I'm semi-retired. So he still wants to do things just like me.
Okay, so
I just don't want to do 9 to 5 going into an office every week.
Gotcha. Okay,
no more of that.
Hold on to that, though, because I got to tell people that you came back. I know. So that was December 2014.
Okay.
And we talked about why Scot, the name Scot Turner. Scott was, I guess your birth name is S-C-O-T-T.
Yeah, my legal name is 2 T's. Yep.
Somebody talked you into changing it to S-K-O-T. Who was that who talked you into that?
That was David Marsden.
David Marsden, okay.
Yep,
but then you kind of found a compromise because now you go by S-C-O-T. So you've dropped a T, but you brought back the C.
Yeah, long story. It was quick answer to this. I think we talked about it before, but
this is in the description. Still,
I was really into astrology, things like that. Still am. I still believe in it. I think it's one of the oldest sciences, and it's based on math.
Put
and
quotes
everything.
around sciences.
Yeah, sciences. And then, so I went to a numerologist.
Okay.
And I got a professional reading. There are really these people that do this, and it was like an hour long, and there's a lot of math involved and everything. It basically said your name should have 4 letters, not 5. And because you're in communication, the K is not as open as the C is to communicating. And anyway, and I bought it all. Oh, I did. I just like, oh yeah, that sounds cool.
Okay, because I want to sell you on some. I have some land in Florida I want to talk to you about after this recording. I think you'd be perfect.
I know, and to this day, I'm a little embarrassed about it. About like Prince changing his name to the symbol thing. I feel a little funny about it, but I've kept the and one of the reasons I kept the Scott with 1 T is because when Twitter, formerly
I still call
X,
it Twitter.
Me
it's
too.
Twitter for me.
Twitter X, whatever.
Right.
So I was looking for a handle, and if you put Scott with 2 T's and a Turner, it's 3 T's. It looks ridiculous. So
too much.
That's
too much. I love it. See,
yeah.
you covered it succinctly again, like greatest hits, and then February 2020, which was episode 579. So we took 6 years off. It looks like almost 5.5 years, and then we caught up. You kicked out the jams that episode, and by the way, the funny thing is, the first time you came over, I guess it was early days. I don't think I had any sponsors, and we chatted for 1 hour and 3 minutes, which at the time was a long episode. Yeah. But in February 2020, we went 2 hours and 21 minutes. So things changed.
I remember that.
Okay. But then you came back in August because we just I wanted an episode where we dove deep into the history of Energy 108 because I felt like all of our convos were CFNY centric, but you have this great Energy 108 history. And we played clips, and it was a deep dive. If anyone has any fondness for Energy 108, you on episode 703. We dove deep into it. And then you came back October 2021 in the backyard because of COVID regulations.
I remember that, yes.
We talked about I can't believe I'm going to say these words, quadruple bypass.
Yes.
How you feeling?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, fine. Everything.
Now, is that wood? Okay, I think it's from IKEA, so I think it might be Swedish wood.
Yeah.
Swedish
wood. So far so good. And now that I'm retired,
which we're going to get to in a minute.
Air quotations. I can get on the bike more. I am not like in this. We'll talk about.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to get that in a minute
later. But yeah.
So thank you for giving us a little health update because quadruple bypass sounds scary, but you talked about that in episode 930.
Yeah.
We talked about at the time you had a new gig. What gig were you starting in October 2021?
2021 would have been, was that the move or
I don't know.
Was that K-Fun, which is now a Bounce Bell Media station?
You've been everywhere, man. Okay, so then we talked about some music, some concert anniversaries. You're very good at this.
Sorry, what year again? Was it
2021?
Oh, 2021. That would have been, with Evanoff in Brantford. So that was...
Is that your last gig?
My last radio gig. Okay. So there's... there was...
You were just starting it.
Light 92 and Country 93.9. 2 great stations.
Now, we did spend some time talking about a CFNY colleague of yours who had passed away, James Baby Scott.
Yeah.
And sadly, later in this episode, we're going to talk about another CFNY colleague of yours who has passed away. So we'll talk about that later. We talked about classic Chum FM, some classic CFNY, the CFNY documentary, which we're going to revisit today. So that was October 2021. We were talking about the CFNY documentary. Yeah. We talked about cycling. We'll touch on that later. Another great appearance, and that was in the backyard. And now you're back, your 5th full appearance, but I'm here to tell you the VP of Sales has done a little digging. And he says, it is your 5th solo appearance, but you actually appeared on 2 other episodes. You appeared at the Party for Marty at the Opera House. Martin Streak, we remembered him, and I'm wearing a shirt for Pete Fowler, who helped organize that Party for Marty, and you were on the mics that day. And, of course... the big episode 1021, you were a part of that Zoom.
Yes, the Zoom call. That was great.
The Zoom call that inspired a documentary.
Yes.
To be discussed.
Yes, okay.
All right, so now you've kind of touched on it, but this is the big moment here. You have retired as program director of Evanoff Communications Light 92 and Hot Country 93.9 in Brantford, Ontario, home of the great one, Phil Hartman, and also Wayne Gretzky. And I need to ask you why. Why did you, Scot Turner, retire from this industry that you have loved forever?
Wow. Well, it just, it's a feeling. It just felt like that was time. It's all in all was, 45 years, I guess, in doing radio. And that's a long time doing one thing. And I've always admired people that had moved on to a different career and made a huge, leap and change. I never did that. At times I wanted to, excuse me, but I just, you have built up a certain career and experience, and so you're valued that way. And so jumping to a totally different career, which I really did want to do a couple of times, was like, I got to start all over. I have to get some training. I might have to go to school and all these different things.
Right.
It's like, so there's a lazy side of me, clearly. As you get to know yourself as you get older, I know there's a lazy Scot in there. And so I was like, it's too much work. I'll keep doing radio. Even though I could see signs that radio was heading in a direction and it was not going to be, as robust and
is it a sunsetting industry?
Yeah, a little bit, yes. And to be truthful about the radio industry, which has been around a long, long time, it's amazing that it's still hanging in there. Use those terms, hanging in there, because it is struggling against so many other media choices, right? Obviously, and podcasting being a big one. So, but
you just felt it was time.
Yeah, it was time. And and I wanted to, having a quadruple bypass, very aware of health and thinking,
Right.
even though I feel fine right now, and in some perspectives, 64 is young, but I also want to do a bunch of things, be active, 70's not that far off, and I want to be able to do a bunch of things. So, they're e-bikes now. But I don't want to ride an e-bike until I have to, right?
Right.
So all those different things, and travel around the world, and being able to just be mobile, and those things in your younger years, quotations again. I just want to do certain things still.
I think it's amazing that you can retire at 64. Can I retire at 64? It just seems like, I guess if you enjoy what you do, you almost never retire. Like, you just sort of, if you enjoy what you do, like, why would you want to stop?
Yeah, and I think so. I think that there was this term somebody came up with, this gig economy. The world is kind of moving for a lot of people into having a bunch of gigs or side hustles that becomes their career. And you can
argue
attest
yourself.
To
this.
Yeah,
I live in this universe. Yes.
Yeah,
and I've been living in this universe now for 6 years.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge amount of data showing that this is kind of a direction going. So I think that's kind of me in the future. I think there will be some little gigs, little projects that will be income generating, but I'm not out there for that reason. So I want to do something that's just something I want to do on my time. And preferably from home. I love the working from home concept, and big fan of it. Testing, just driving out to see you today. So it's another reminder.
I actually feel bad. I feel bad about that because I do like to get guests in the studio,
and I prefer that too. I do. That being said, about working from home, and there's a lot you can do with Zoom and the other video channels that are out there. But it is really cool. You still can't beat the in-person, face-to-face experience.
I agree 100%. And that's why I'm a stickler. And I'm like, Scott, you're going to drive here. But you could have biked here, but it is a crappy day. That's a bit far. It's a bit far. Yeah, I don't even, because you sold the place you were living at. So I don't even have, are you in Burlington?
So I'm in Paris, Ontario.
Okay. That is a long way off.
Paris, Ontario. And I did want to give a shout out. By the way, they're filming a movie there right now. We're actually watching it from
They shot a movie once.
What's the name of it? I want to give a shout out to it. Motorheads. It's a series on Prime coming out in spring of 2025. So they were just, Paris is this cute little old town. So they've obviously made it to be like an old small town America. So they put the American flags up. Right. Anyway, the series is starring Ryan Philippe, who was once married to Reese Witherspoon.
That's 100% correct. Yeah. And he had a moment, but he seems to have been missing for a while. Yes. We found him now in Paris, Ontario.
There he is. So I wanted to give a shout out because one of my favorite hangs in Paris, Ontario is the Paris Inn. It used to be an inn many, many years ago, but it's a restaurant and pub. And they serve on tap Great Lakes beer. And
wow,
I had one on the patio.
Okay. Would you like some fresh Great Lakes beer to take back to Paris, Ontario?
I can't help but looking at it right there in front of me.
You're taking some home with you, okay?
I would love to. Yeah, what did I have? I had the, is there a pale?
Yeah, the Canuck.
Is that it?
Well, this is their biggest seller, the Canuck
okay.
Pale Ale.
Yeah, that was
Delicious.
really good.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's a new can, too. They just changed the cans on that.
Okay, cool.
And, yeah, you're taking some fresh craft beer with you. I will shout out Great Lakes quickly that they just branded a Holy Mackinac lager with Joe Bowen. Because
That's great.
Okay, so our first round, I don't know, do you follow, you a big hockey fan, or are you just casually?
Somewhat.
Somewhat, okay.
Yep.
So we only learned last night the Leafs will play the Boston Bruins in the first round. So we know how that typically ends, right?
Well, what choice was there going to be?
Florida, I think.
Yeah,
And
right.
they
Which is
also spanked us last year. They're built for the playoffs, as they say. So, okay, so... the realist in me thinks this will not be a long playoff run. Like this will be a 5 or 6 gamer or something. But Great Lakes is going to keep making the Holy Mackinac lager that Joe Bowen helped with. As long as the Leafs playoff run lasts. So they're sort of like obviously, like all Torontonians, many Torontonians anyways, hoping for a long run, but it's like, this might be the shortest run of branded beer ever. Like this, So anyway, we will see, because, it's been very close with Boston in the past. There was a certain Game 7, I recall, we had a 4-1 lead with 10 minutes left. This is all burned into my cranium.
I remember what, oh man. Yeah.
I remember, I think Fradden, or if you see at the post, anyway, somebody scored. It'll come back to me who it was. But
Can't remember.
I was living with my now wife, but we weren't married yet. And right, it was just before we got married in June. Okay, do the math here. But I remember whenever we scored to go 4-1, apparently I leapt 6 feet in the air. Like, this is happening. I can't believe it. And the rest is history.
It was a crazy series, that series. It really was. I hope, if they got to get by the first round. That's
we did
just
that
a
last
must.
year.
Yes.
So, and that's the only time we can say that.
Then we're back to square one again. It's like, can we get by the second series, right?
Right. You know what they say? To be the best, you got to beat the best. Okay, this is what they say. I heard that. Maybe it was Alan Cross who said that. I don't know.
Yeah,
but later I'm going to ask you for an update on the CFNY doc, but I will just point out that you are an executive producer on this CFNY Spirit of Radio documentary. So you're not just a casual contributor like many a CFNY personality. Like, you're an executive producer.
Yes. So as is Ivor, we've talked about, and Alan Cross is, and we have a couple of other people that know much more about making films and documentaries.
You three are the CFNY experts that are actually given proper titles on this thing.
Yeah, and I think you need that, and I think that's where our expertise comes from. I have no idea how to make a documentary or make a film, and I've learned a lot, watching how it's done from the sidelines. So I think you've got to, here's a pile of information, and you help along storyline wise, but you leave it up to the rest to
Who's the director?
Director is Matt. Last name I forget right now. I'm good with people's first names, and
I'll dig it up because he wrote me a lovely note. I just want to shout him out.
Something. But Matt's great.
Matt Schlichter.
Yes, there it is.
Schichter. There's no L in there.
Something
so
like
Schichter. But Matt Schichter wrote me a lovely note. He was on a train heading to interview Geets Romo. And he said he was listening to Geets Romo on Toronto Mic'd. And he just wanted to say he loved it. Great research, and he just loved the conversation. Geets was in the basement because I'm kind of a stickler for that, as you know.
Yes.
He's a Schichter. I'm a stickler, okay? So I want to shout out Matt. I'm looking forward to seeing this CFNY doc. Yep. Maybe we do the update right now since I started it.
Sure, yeah.
Where are we at with the CFNY documentary?
So, and Matt's also, a fan of the station and, grew up listening to the station. And so that was part of it too, as everybody involved in it was, including myself, from somebody that worked there. I was also just, even working there, I was a fan of the station. And I listened to the station in years. It was a dream for me to, work at that station someday. So, I approached this project as being a fan of the station, and there's many years in the story of the early years, which is great. Is covered very well in the documentary. The crazy things that went on, a lot of things behind the scenes that some people may not know about is covered, and it's on schedule to be the fall. We don't have a particular date yet, but the plan is this coming fall.
What about TIFF?
So that's also being discussed. So we're hoping that will be part of it too, and do some screenings in some theaters across the country kind of thing before hopefully getting on a streaming platform of some kind. One of the things just about not knowing about documentaries and films, and one of the challenges is you've got roughly about a 10-year. This is the spirit of radio years, roughly 1977 to 91, 92 kind of thing. So it's a lot of time, and trying to tell all of that story into an hour and a half is very, very difficult. So stuff does get cut, and you do have to leave bits and pieces out. That's unfortunate, but that's the way it works, right? You have a film to make here, right?
So what's the target length?
I think most documentaries you want to be around an hour and a half. So I think we're looking at about an hour and 20 minutes right now. I think I can give that away. And it's pretty.
But you got to get there's a
right
demarcation line, right? Like where if it's under 90 minutes, people think it's it's not full. I feel like there's a you know how you price things at like $2.99 instead of $3. Like there's a psychological barrier there.
Maybe, yeah.
I feel like you're gonna have to get that to 90 minutes. I think for people to say, oh, there's a full film here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Am I out to lunch there?
No, I think that could be argued. I think, the creative processes, that's the thing about these, what's great about the streaming of TV shows and series is that, if I was a film director and I said, you got to make a film and it's like one piece, one story, 2 hours or whatever it is I'd want to do a series because that gives you more room to tell the story in further detail. But there's also the other side you have to look at it too, is because if you go too long, it starts to be boring for some people. Maybe the hardcore people are like, I want more. Other people are like, okay.
Well, let me speak to a specific.
Give me the goods.
So, I'm, as you can imagine, these documentaries, these nostalgic Gen X docs that are popping up here and there are right in my wheelhouse. Like I eat them up. I was literally at Lowest of the Low at the concert hall. I was there on Saturday night. And of course, Simon Head is there. He's been on Toronto Mike. Simon Head directed a documentary on Lowest of the Low called Subversives. Alan Cross is in this thing. So he's a talking head in these things. It is very good. And I got to go to the premiere at the Rivoli, and it's right in my wheelhouse. But there's another documentary. I think I'm going to guess that you, Alan, Ivor, you all watched this doc unfold and everything very closely because it was kind of a template for what you guys might have to face. 299 Queen Street West. Are you familiar with this? This is a documentary about sort of basically the history of much music. And the gentleman who made it, his name is Sean Menard. He's been on Toronto Mike. But so they didn't get into TIFF. I guess TIFF didn't accept it or something, but he decided to rent Roy Thompson Hall himself. Mm-hmm. And he threw his own premiere, privately at Roy Thompson Hall. I was there. The film was well received. It went well beyond the 90-minute mark. I think it would have been better as a 90-minute doc, and then it sort of starts to linger with big American stars near the end. But I wonder, are you guys kind of seeing how that unfolded and learning from mistakes made there? Because that documentary was promoted to premiere on Crave streaming service. Right. Literally promoted by Crave. Like we have 299 Queen, and this is when the masses would see it because they did what you talked about earlier, like a little tour where they did these private viewings and stuff, and then they'd have a Q&A with like people from Much Music like Erica M and Michael Williams, etc., and Steve Anthony. But they never did make it to Crave. Like this is the interesting story, is that it got pulled from Crave. Like literally, it's like right just before the premiere because of an issue with clearing music. Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Scot Turner, a couple of things. It's kind of good, I think, for your doc that 299 Queen Street West went first, and you could see the foibles and mistakes made along the way, and ensure you don't make the same ones because music in your CFNY doc is going to be key. People are going to want to hear how soon is now, but I don't have any clue what that cost, what that entails. Can you speak to the music?
Okay, a couple things on that. Good point. I think early on, before the Much Music doc, early on, and this is, why we have other people involved in it, the executive producers.
Professionals?
We have one professionals. Yes, they know what they're doing. One specifically. And it certainly helped that Ivor worked for, Universal Music Canada and done so much music licensing. So he knows people. You need to get the stuff licensed. It has to be. You've got to pay your rights. Right. And there's no shortcuts. You have to pay the rights. And so we have someone involved in that. The other thing I'll just say on that too is that one thing, from the beginning, music, CFNY, you're always thinking about the music. I think we have to remind people too that it really is a story about the radio station. So, it wasn't going to be an hour and a half of just music videos or playing songs, and remember, New Order songs are like 8 minutes long, and how do you fit all that in, et cetera, et cetera. And there's so much music, right? In 1977 to 1992. So, to tell the story, you can't fit in as much music as you would like. So that I just, we'll give people the heads up on that.
Yeah, but this document, because in theory, I've seen music docs without the music, which obviously is because they didn't want to pay for the music or couldn't properly clear.
Yes,
I've seen
because it's expensive. Yes, it is.
And it's a different experience.
And sometimes they say no too. By the way, you can ask, say, can we feature? And they just say no.
So you can whip out the credit card.
Yeah,
I'd say I've got Alan Cross's credit card right here. We're ready to, we're ready to license this song by Depeche Mode or whatever.
Yeah, and you can get
Depeche
turned
Mode
down,
can say no go, bro. And this is sort of why, like, sometimes you'll hear a song played by, let's say, Donald Trump at some political rally, and then the artist is like, no, because they don't want to be affiliated with the movement.
Yeah, and it can take a long time, the process too.
So where are we at with that? Like, I guess I'm curious. You're still obviously lined up for the fall 2024 release, but I think, in fact, I know I had Alan Cross and Rob Johnston on this program when the ongoing history of new music. I think they hit 1,000 episodes or some milestone.
Yes, they did. Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
Which is amazing. It's amazing. Of course, that's not a podcast. That's a radio show. But now most people, I think, I would guess, consume it via podcast. Like, that's sort of a show that existed pre-podcast, and now it's kind of evolved into the podcast. So now you get less of the music because they don't, we don't know how to license music for podcasts. But we'll talk about that later.
Oh, yes.
I want to talk about it. Like, like we can't whip out Alan Cross's credit card and say, okay, we're going to play How Soon Is Now, Hit Me Up or whatever.
Yeah.
This mechanism does not exist. So that's a whole separate combo we'll have later. But Alan did talk about how they're not going to put out this doc without certain songs. Like, they're out now. And is there any update on terms of, like, are there songs you wanted badly but couldn't get or couldn't afford? I'm putting you on the spot here, Scott. People want to know.
So I'll tell you, and I can't give away everything, but there are some songs that we individually would have liked in there, but it's also following a storyline too, because and that's how things get edited. There were I don't know how many, like 60, 70 interviews done with various people, and a whole bunch didn't make it in or got cut. And I did see, the one interesting thing in the process of making a documentary is I got to see the various different cuts.
Right.
And there were times it was, wow, okay, that's completely changed. And between a director and an editor,
right.
And looking at the storyline, all of a sudden that part is no longer in it, and they move this one in.
Can there be a director's cut for the real heads out there?
Right. Yes. That's a good idea, actually. That's a great idea.
I know you're going to make the 90-minute for the masses. Okay. This is because you need the great
and that's a good point. And you have to understand too that because this is a very much a Toronto, Southern Ontario, Western New York story that has a bit of a Canadian story to it, but we also wanted to, and this was from the beginning, we wanted to make this that it could be internationally digestible. So you'd have to think of that a little bit too. So is the story compelling enough?
So I had the same complaint about 299 Queen Street, which was a great effort and has some great footage.
Right.
I always feel like, maybe am I criticizing this? Because it's well done. Okay, well done. Good job, Mr. Menard. But I definitely watched that doc and said, oh, this is for Americans. Like, it's like Americans who, it's a much music doc for Americans. And essentially I'm too close to this subject matter because I was born and raised in Toronto. Yeah. So it's got some, like, especially the first half hour, there's a lot of good early, like 80s much music stuff and some stuff you haven't seen in a while. Shout out to Retro Ontario FOTM Hall of Famer Ed Conroy. But I wonder, now that we're talking it out here, the CFNY doc needs to be 2 versions, okay?
Yeah.
You need to have a version, global version, 90 minutes. This station existed. Here, there's Rush, Spirit of Radio. You got that song, right? Wing?
Maybe.
You can't do the doc without it. You know that. You can't do the doc without it. I just did a couple of big Rush deep dives myself with Donna Halper and Bob Roper. You were listening to Bob Roper.
Yeah, I just started on the way here, and it's fascinating that Bob Roper. I invite you to listen to that. So I just started. It's a great, just out of the gate. And the Blue Rodeo story is this fantastic story.
Blue Rodeo, great story. And then you were going to get to the Donna Halper WMMS, I think it is, in Cleveland. Donna's in charge of the music there. Donna needs some imports, and her friend Bob Roper sends her this independent release called Rush. Self-titled. Donna gets this album. Donna listens to it. Donna likes the song Working Man because it's got a blue collar. Cleveland's a blue collar town. Donna has somebody at the station play it. The request line lights up back in the day when the request line could mean something. They play it more. Next thing you know it, they're bringing Rush to Cleveland for shows. And, Bob's, Bob Roper's, this band gets signed and Rush becomes Rush. They change their drummer. The rest is history. But Donna herself listened to the Bob Roper episode, and Donna said, not in person because she's living in Massachusetts or something like that, but she said, I would love to talk to you, and we had a great convo about it, so I got the whole story there.
I got to listen to that.
You got to listen to that, and you got to, I know you got it, but you got to get Spirit Radio, because the whole Mars, it's all in the story, but I'm off topic here. I have not seen this documentary, but you do need the 2 versions. You need the 90-minute, which is what's going to stream on Crave or whatever, Prime, whatever you sell it to. And it's for everybody, the Americans, people in, the other Paris, France. They can enjoy it. Everybody can enjoy this documentary about this great little radio station that could, and they're playing what they want, and Marsden Spirit and everything. Great. Then you need
good idea.
The people who listen to CFNY, okay?
I think, everybody, and you're talking about an artistic endeavor. We're talking about music, and we're talking about art, and it's a radio station, although it's a business, it's a creative endeavor too. So I think that when you're in the creative sphere, people have different views and opinions, and I like this mix of this song better, or I prefer.
We're going to get to that in a minute.
That sort of thing too. So I think that and that's where editing, I think, comes into in filmmaking and documentaries, is that there's a different viewpoint, and somebody may come away feeling, I wish they talked more about this. Somebody may say, I'm glad they mentioned this, but they didn't say this. Those things, right? It's hard to please everybody.
A lot of decisions. You have to make a lot of choices, and this is where I have mad respect for the people like Matt, who's directing your doc, and Sean Menard, who directed the 299 Queen Street. There's so many decisions that have to be made. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to please everybody with every decision. And then some idiot in South Etobicoke in his basement is going to be upset at this decision that was made, but he's not seeing the full picture, which is like, we need to sell this thing. And this is a profit center here. It's not just about, you deep divers who want to go deeper. Like, I think people say, Mike, you went really deep on this. I'm like, yeah. That I didn't go deep enough because you were able to finish this freaking thing without turning it off. Like, I got to go deeper, and your CFNY doc can't be for those people, or you'll never make a penny off of it.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yes. The other thing, if I could say, which really started the spark, the idea for Ivor and I to get together to do a podcast. It was around that, when the film comes out, we were going to do this sort of companion podcast, so that we could talk a bit about the film and how things came about, and certain things that were in and certain things that weren't in,
right,
and answer some of those questions and go a little bit deeper, because a bunch of stuff had to get cut out and people got cut out, and we'd like to have them on to explain their story a little bit deeper. So that we thought would be.
How about this?
Yeah.
I promise you, because I am passionately interested in you and Ivor's endeavor here, like, we will have a podcast segment in this conversation where I want all that information about what's next. What are you and Ivor cooking? I heard on Humble and Fred that you guys are taking them out for a lunch to pick their brain about this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Where's my lunch? Sir Scott, where the fuck's my lunch?
Yeah, really.
Like, I'm hearing this and I'm like, Ivor and Scott are going to take Humble and Fred out to lunch and pick their brains.
I was going to talk to you today after this podcast about that very thing.
We do everything on recording.
We can just on the recording.
Okay.
Yeah. So because we've been inspired by you, obviously, and you produced that show. I mean,
I produce Humble and Fred.
You produced that show, so
absolutely,
you're the key guy, obviously. Yeah. But I think there's a number of things they've done that are really, really cool. Plus, but we also want to do our thing and make sure that it's obviously going to be music centric. And the other thing that, just on that note, is that talking about licensing and that's what scared me away. I wanted to do a podcast a couple of years back, as you know, and I was horrified by. What? You can't just
there's no
play
mechanism.
A song. Yeah, you have to have
ongoing
it
history
licensed.
in
And
music.
I thought, oh God, because that's the podcast I want to do is going to have lots of music in it, so I'm out because I don't want to get sued.
Well, you're talking to a guy who, this is episode 1472, and as you might know from kicking out the jams on this program, and even Ivor Hamilton has kicked out the jams on this program, even Alan Cross has kicked out the jams on this program, I play lots of unlicensed music all the time. But if you listen to Ongoing History of New Music, which is owned by Chorus, a little less independent than yours truly, and Humble and Fred for that matter, Robbie J is playing 15 seconds, and as if they can argue, and I don't know how this logic works, but they can argue some kind of fair use or something if it came to that, but that's a bit of a gamble, I think. But there is no legal way to license music for your podcast.
Right.
And Alan, we're all looking for this, right? And then if it did exist, what would that cost and would it be worthwhile? But anyways, can you tease, and I'm excited about your podcast venture with Ivor, and we're going to talk more about that later, but can you tease, actually, let me rephrase that.
Sure.
If, let's say at the El Macombo, Humble and Fred went for their interview for this documentary. This actually happened. That's why I'm bringing up this example.
Okay.
So they sit down with, I guess, Alan, and they have a chat.
Okay.
Now, I doubt this is true, but let's say the final 90-minute cut doesn't have the Humble and Fred interview in it. Okay? Let's say, will you inform Humble and Fred, and this is all hypothetical because I'm sure they won't be on the cutting room floor, but will you inform that person before the debut, the release, that they're not in the doc? Like, will people who sat down for the chat find out they were on the cutting room floor when they see it? Or will you give them a courtesy heads up? Thank you for your time. It was a great conversation. Choices were made, and you won't be in this documentary.
We haven't had those conversations, but that's a brilliant idea.
Because it's going to hurt feelings if you sat down. If I sat down for my,
Yeah, we do. I did see the list of the people that obviously are in it, and then the list of the people. Well, I've seen the.
Well, do you want to just tell the people who are cut? Just tell them right now. Who was cut from this thing? I need to know the names of the people who were cut from this thing.
And here goes. But that's a great idea of reaching out to them, just saying, hey.
A courtesy heads up.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be sitting in the premiere. Probably, maybe your whiffs. You will have been excited from being interviewed, like, oh my God, I'm going to be in this doc, and you're not in the doc. Yeah. And you know how you'll feel afterwards? Yeah. Like, why couldn't they have given me a heads up? That's what they're going to say.
Well, and here's the funny thing. I talked about these different edits, and there must have been about 5 or 6 different edits of like, okay, here's the new edit we've done. And then it's like, oh, this person's no longer in it. And then the next edit, oh, they're back in again. So I see you put more, and then, but Humble and Fred are in it.
Yeah, Humble and Fred are
final
in it because you cut it in like 92, right? So they kind of because and this will come up in a moment. I'm going to talk about 1989, and that is the year that Danny Kingsbury goes to Montreal to chat up his friend Humble Howard, who's on the air with Jeff Lumby, and I'm going to read a note from Jeff in a minute. And in 1989, recruits basically Humble Howard to leave Montreal and come to CFNY in Toronto and start a show with the current, I guess he was more than a sports guy at that point. He was a sports guy at Pete and Gates, but then he had done more, I guess, in post.
He was a personality of the show, for sure.
But Fred Patterson. And then Humble and Fred is born in 1989. And their first show, thanks to the clippings you shared, because I had always assumed the first Humble and Fred show, I had assumed was either Labor Day or the day after in 1989. And
but it was
your research,
3rd?
August 8th.
August 8th, yeah.
Which I did not know.
And I just found that just recently, so that's pretty cool. Very cool. So they're coming up on 35 years?
Yeah, 35 years. So August, they're not on the cutting room floor. But
being together as a show, as a team,
there's
right?
some
which is pretty cool.
But I noticed
that's true, yeah.
Even Alan Cross, I noticed when I listened. By the way, I got a correction in the live stream. Thank you to Basement Dweller, whose name will come up later. The episode that I did with Robbie J. and Alan Cross was not for episode 1000. It was actually the 30th anniversary of the show. But there was a later, like since then, there's been an episode 1000, and I do notice that there's like they talk about the 30 years, but they don't talk about the fact that Alan leaves a couple of times, like during this 30 years. Like, you know what I mean? Like he leaves, he comes back, and then he actually literally is at Indy 88 for a while, okay, which is not owned by Chorus, you might know.
Yes, I remember that. I remember.
So it's like you just sort of like...
His voice was over everything, right? Yeah.
He was the guidance counselor, I'd like to say, for Indy 88, but then he got back, and now he's with Chorus again as an independent contractor. But more on that later. Let me read the note from Jeff Lumby. Since you're not going to give me any of the names of the people who interviewed for that doc and are not going to be in the doc.
Can I jump in on another thought too, though? And you just your point right there about Alan is the same kind of thing happens, with making a film versus a kind of a linear documentary that's like chronologically, this is exactly how it happened. Like if you do that, it can get really boring for some people. If you tell the exact, that's why there's this, creative license sometimes. It's like, inspired by, you see movies that based on a true story. Because sometimes if you tell the exact true story, then you're doing a very, very linear documentary, right? Because things sometimes don't go in order, and then to tell a sort of entertaining film-like story, you kind of skip a part maybe, or skip over a part. Follow me?
I'm with you 100% because you are making it. Yeah, you're creating a piece of entertainment, which is factual, which doesn't mean you need to include all the little detail. You don't need to include the fact that Alan Cross just appears for a few years before he comes back. Like that's that's like a fact ruining the flavor of this story, and it's not necessary for that.
So some would argue that you need to be absolutely factual. But
what you can't do, what I get bothered by, that doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I kind of understand that. What bothers me is when you blatantly say Alan Cross was there for 30 years when he wasn't. Like, you lie. So this is where my beef, this is a beef that,
fair enough,
mild beef that I had with the 299 Queen Street West doc, which is they show the Bare Naked Ladies.
And I haven't seen it, by the way. I still haven't
Will
seen it.
You got to get that song Yoko Ono or something for the doc, right? Like, because you guys, I mean, I feel, but again, I wonder, now, this is me now, executive producer Mike talking. The 90-minute version for the masses, it should include the whole Breaking Bare Naked Ladies, because they had a #1 hit in the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. So that is not a Canadian success, right? That is a global phenomenon. But you definitely need, maybe like, I'm thinking now Shakespeare My Butt, right? So the average American won't have a clue who Lowest to Low is. They just won't know, right? Unless they're in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Buffalo, L-O-W, by the way. But, they didn't have a top 100 Billboard hit, let alone a #1 Billboard hit. They were a very big phenomenon in our world, thanks to CFNY and Shakespeare My Butt plays, and that's sort of, so it's almost like the 90-minute version for the masses could skip the Lowest of the Low stuff, but the version you're going to make for me, the long version, right? That's got to have a whole. It's got to have the story of this independent band from Toronto and how they kind of got launched on CFNY.
We definitely, once it's out. And you'll be, the premiere screening. You will be invited.
Which version?
We will definitely do
Which version?
The first version, because then we'll have, we'll do a podcast and bring everybody in, and we can get your opinions of, okay, guys, I love this. On the extended, Toronto mic'd cut, I would like this added.
Well, and now I'm thinking, of course, because you're all focused on the 90-minute version. That's what you're going to sell, and that's the whole idea of this doc. The version I'm fantasizing about is actually a podcast now that I think about it. It's like, I just need give me all the source.
Yep.
Give me permission to use it. Okay. And you can be the narrator or whatever, or Alan or Ivor, all of you, whatever.
Yeah.
But then this is a podcast series where almost nothing gets left on the cutting room floor. Like, this is for the real heads. You know what I mean?
Well, that's kind of what Ivor and I are talking about, right?
Okay, but
there you go.
Okay, so to be discussed in the podcast section, I got to read Jeff Lumby's note here. I honestly realized, Scott, I could talk to you for several hours because you were there. Shout out to Brother Bill, who kind of gave us that expression. But you were there. Yeah. You got the bona fide. That's going to come into play. I'm going to play a song and ask you about a band. But Jeff Lumby.
Yes.
What station were you his program director at?
So that would have been K-Fun. Well, sorry, it was Dave Rocks in Kitchener.
Okay.
He came, did a guest spot at K-Fun, which is now Bounce in Kitchener. But Dave Rocks, Dave FM at one time, and then it became Dave Rocks. So it's somewhere in there. He was working the morning show there. Yes.
Are you ready for some high praise from FOTM Jeff Lumby?
Oh, well, sure.
Okay. Always ready for that, right?
Yeah.
This is Jeff's words, not mine, everybody.
Oh, okay.
There were only 2 program directors who really made a difference in my broadcasting life.
Wow.
Scot Turner was one of them. Amazing. Wow. Jeff Lumby, big fan of you as a program director.
Wow, that's huge. Thank you, Jeff. Here's the thing about me as a program director. I've seen, and now that I'm retired, you can look back and I can say anything I want now.
You're retired?
Right, yeah. So, but I think I was a good programmer. I don't know if I was a great program director. So, working with talent was not one of my, I don't think I was particularly great at it. So what I did by default, I think, is let the people, give them some freedom. I was less about, you need to do it like exactly like this and that. I was a little more hands off with talent, especially if I knew they were just inherently talented. And, a lot of the people I've worked with were, and there's a reason they get to those positions, particularly morning shows. They have talent. They bring talent with them. And if you just let them, be themselves a little more, give them a little space and time, And it seems like that's such an easy thing to do, but there's a lot of program directors and programmers I've seen, and I've seen what they do, and they just get their hands on it way too much.
When I talk to Fred Patterson about his career, particularly at CFNY, he often talks about David Marsden giving him the freedom, the space, to be Fred, to figure it out and to find his voice, and just don't micromanage and get in the weeds and get your hands dirty in there. Like, you have these professional. If you don't trust the talent to do it, you've hired the wrong person.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, good leaders will empower and will clear, basically enable you to be your best.
Yeah.
And Jeff Lumbee is a very talented broadcaster. And this is all going to come full circle. But before I bring it back to Danny Kingsbury, who goes to Montreal, where Lumbee and Humble have a show, and takes half of that show and brings it back to Toronto, and creates the Humble and Fred show. I need to close a loop. I started, and then I got, like, as happens on this program, I got distracted.
By the way, Jeff, thanks for the comments there. It's really nice.
He lives in France now, as you might know.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
So I brought up Bare Naked Ladies, and then I got excited about the fact that you need Bare Naked Ladies in the CFNY doc. I feel like I'm writing it now, but Bare Naked Ladies, the reason I brought it up is...
I don't think you'll be disappointed, by the way.
Good. 299 Queen Street West, the documentary, not the address. It states as a fact in there, it's stated as a fact that the Bare Naked Ladies made their national television debut on, I shouldn't say national, but their television debut on Speaker's Corner, where they sing Yoko Ono. And every Bare Naked Ladies fan or, City TV Speaker's Corner fan has seen this footage 100 times. Bare Naked Ladies, they got the big sweaters or whatever, they're singing Yoko Ono. But the fact is, before they recorded that for Speaker's Corner, Bare Naked Ladies were on a YTV show where they won an award. It was like, I can't remember what it's called, some Kids Select, whatever. Bottom line is, that's just a falsehood. So that goes back to the whole, like, we don't need to tell every detail to make this story palatable and entertaining, and that's okay. But that is very different than stating something that is just not true.
True.
I don't have any appetite. Like, if I see untruths said as if they were facts, that's what ticks me off.
Yeah, it depends how that's presented. I agree. I agree.
So that was one thing
good point.
I didn't like. So just, you don't have to tell all the details. You can skip, you can omit some stuff for creative purposes and to make it a better story, but don't say something that's not true. Okay.
Yep.
Now, why am I talking about, so Jeff Lumbee says you're one of the 2 PDs who made a difference in his broadcasting life. Do you want to guess the other one?
Oof. Jeff, the other PDs he's talking about?
Yeah. I've said his name in this episode.
Oh.
That's your clue.
Oh, Danny Kingsbury.
Danny Kingsbury.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay. Let me play a little music and ask you about something.
Yep.
Outside there's a boxcar waiting outside the family store. Out by the fire breathing. Outside we wait till face turns blue. I know the nervous walking. I know the dirty bed hangs. Out by the boxcar waiting. Take me way to nowhere place. It is a wait so long. So long, so long.
All right, here we go.
Here comes a man.
Great song.
Thanks to you, Scot Turner. I follow you on social media, and I learned from you. Did you know, do you know what album this is on?
Doolittle.
Do you know any fun facts about Doolittle as
Yes.
we record on April 17, 2024?
There you go. So if you're listening on this day, yes, like right now. So 35 years ago today, this album was released. And think of how big this album became, not out of the gate, but over time. It sits at 141 on Rolling Stone magazine's top 500 albums of all time. That's pretty impressive. 141.
Amazing. And this song, one of the longer songs on the album, is 3 minutes and 21 seconds. Here Comes Your Man. But this is the same album. If you're wondering, what album is this from Pixies? Debaser's on this. Wave of Mutilation is on this. Monkey Gone to Heaven is on this.
Yeah.
It's just loaded. I often, I was gonna say I often say, I don't know if I often say it, but I often think about Nirvana, we just celebrate. You don't celebrate. We just mourn the loss of Kurt Cobain.
Yes.
You don't celebrate the anniversary of Kurt Cobain's passing. That's
Well, in a
sad.
positive way, you do. I mean, in that you respect him for what he did.
You're glad it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he passed away on just 30 years ago, I want to say. 30 years ago last month.
Yeah.
Earlier this month, actually. Anyway, bottom line is there's no denying the influence of Pixies on Nirvana, and a lot of the great Nirvana songs sound a lot like a song you might hear on Doolittle. But here's where I'm going to go, and then I want to hear you talk to this, because you were there. So, remind us, what years are you at CFNY?
So I was 84 to 92. 1984, 1992. Yeah, when I arrived, I was thinking that we're going to talk about JR.
We will, yes.
But I think, I just remember 1984. I was just 24 years old. And just a kid, because JR was, like 10 years older than me, and I was, this new kid they hired.
But you're still
Long time
there
ago.
you're still there in 1989, and we will talk about Jim Reid soon. But in 1989, you're there, and this is a period of time when Danny Kingsbury is the program director at CFNY.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Just to set it up, and then we'll hear from you.
Yeah.
I suppose this story does involve Jeff Lumby, because he was telling this story on Humble and Fred this week.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff Lumby zooms in from France once a month and chats with Humble and Fred. And he was telling this story about, I guess it was about Danny Kingsbury, and that Ivor Hamilton on Facebook was talking, and this is all on Humble and Fred's episode this week, but Danny Kingsbury would not play the Pixies in 1989, much to Ivor's chagrin. You were there, so I'm looking for some info from somebody who was there. What do you know about Pixies in 1989 on CFNY?
So what I can tell you, and there's parts of this I don't remember, and Ivor, because he would have been working at Universal at the time, but we certainly know that it was the fall of '88 is when the format change started, and it kind of ramped in. So when you got to the end of '88 and early '89, so this is when we're talking Pixies time here. It's April, and the station's very heavily into this new format where they're still playing some alternative music, but they're playing top 40 and any, various mainstream,
like a Paula Abdul song, maybe.
It didn't matter,
right,
as long as it was on the charts. It was like, we're playing the biggest of the big hits. Who cares what it sounds like?
George Michael.
And then we'll also play this alternative music. So the unfortunate, duty that Danny Kingsbury had at the time, he was hired as the PD to say, this is our format, make this work. And so I think under that, pretense, I think it's like certain albums are going to come along and it's like, nope, we're not going to play that. We'll let certain alternative stuff play, maybe the established stuff. New Order, there's a new Order, a new Depeche Mode.
Right. The Cure.
There's a Morrissey, okay, yeah, the Smiths were big. So, yeah, Cure, we'll play them. But maybe these Pixie guys, no. That's I'm just speaking on behalf of, I think, the situation where he might have been. Because as I recall, I don't think, and I think I posted that today, is that the station eventually did play
Danny
Pixies,
Elwell
but not
tells
till,
me that
I think,
Reiner
a long time later.
When Reiner Schwartz arrived, so just to get the timeline of program directors, so for, Marsden was program director, and then Don Burns takes over as program director. Is there anyone between Don Burns and Danny Kingsbury?
No.
Okay, so Don Burns...
There was a period of time where there was nobody because Don quit, and then they were looking for a PD.
But Reiner Schwartz takes over for Kingsbury.
Yeah, not long after. So Danny comes in, I can't remember exact date, but... that's,
late 89, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. And then it is the fall of '89 that Reiner is hired because the sale got approved, and it was McLean Hunter, whoever it was. They came in and just said, "Okay, we're gonna go back to the spirit of radio," and that's when Reiner was brought in. And it might have been at that time that the Pixies were added at that time, but it was certainly not in the moment.
So basically, we talked about choices made by people in charge of such decisions. Like, you got to make a decision on things. So essentially, because of this hybrid, right, where you're still playing some hits, like, I don't know, a big Peter Gabriel song or a big George Michael. I remember hearing George Michael Monkey in this era on CFNY, right? Like, so this is the kind of, or Madonna or whatever.
Yep.
but you're also playing the alternative stuff, and you're
Yep.
sticking to your Depeche Mode, your Cure, your Morrissey, your New Order, and
Yep.
when a newer band, even though American alt rock stations were playing Doolittle, and we talked about how, like, in hindsight it's a bit strange, only because a couple of years later CFNY plays the mess out of Nirvana, right? Like, no
Yes.
Pixies, no Nirvana. In hindsight, that's 2020. Everything.
Yeah, and I think maybe Ivor knows more of the story because he probably would have been fighting from the perspective
that's an
of
important
a
detail.
record
So-
company. Yeah, and then I think Danny, you'd have to ask Danny too. I think.
Well, I've tried to get. I wanted to get Danny Kingsbury on just
Yeah.
because of the whole Humble and Fred story that I've been trying to tell for many years now. But Danny politely declined. Like, so
Okay.
Danny Kingsbury not on the record on this, but Ivor comes on often and we can revisit it with him.
Yeah.
But it is a good important detail, I think, that if Ivor's on the label side and he's working for the label that has the Pixies, right?
Right. Yes.
So there is a
Yeah.
little bit of a bias there.
And the thing just to look, and I think we're going to talk about this is one of the things I think Ivor and I talk about in the podcast is that I think part of the problem is that if you had started a station from scratch and you're going to play certain select alternative tracks and maybe some certain select top 40 tracks, and you just launch the station and you have a neat name and some cool imaging and some cool hosts that fit that, and you launch it, it's probably going to be a big station and be quite successful, and people will accept it. Right? When you've already branded yourself a certain way and then you say we're going to be different, but also the same.
That's when you have
called
like
bad branding.
protests at the CRTC
Yes.
and all these things.
That's
which
bad
is
branding. Yeah.
Well documented on this
Yeah.
program. It's funny because when this conversation happened on Humble and Fred with Jeff Lumby, Howard said that when he got to CFNY, he says he felt like it was like a college station, not a real station. Like, it was real concerns for him. Particularly, he just didn't think he was used to stations that were kind of commercial entities that were there to maximize the revenues.
Right.
Where CFNY was about the music, man.
Yeah.
Like, when you're that passionate about the music, it can conflict with the maximizing of revenue.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing too is that when you're looking at 1988, 1989 in the history of the station, there is pressures. You see, there's some the stations having success and monies, but it's what happens, right? You want to grow. There's a certain side of it that and even from staff, that people like, would you like to make more money and have an increase? Well, yeah, sure, right. So that's pressure. And then it's, the board meetings and that, till they say, where are our ratings at and where's our revenue at? And do we want to increase that and grow that? Yeah. And then it's like, yeah, but you also want to be just about the music and just be cool all the time too. So it's the struggle of that, right?
And the people you have on the air that are so passionate about the music, this is the great thing about listening to a station like CFY, is that the person isn't just there to tell you about, upcoming concerts and to tell you what the weather's like, the Jays won again last night and then back selling all this stuff, that they actually know and care about the music. Like, this is a wonderful treat for a fan of music who's listening to the music radio. But then when you start so those people are there.
Yeah.
We love the music. It's all about the music. What are we playing this shit for? But you're bringing in, like, this is what Danny Kingsbury did. He wanted to change the morning show. You were a few years removed from Pete and Geets, and he got Humble Howard in.
Yep.
Let's face it, Humble and Fred didn't care what they were playing. Like, they simply, Howard's a big Steely Dan guy, right? Like, like the music didn't matter. It was what they said between the songs that was kind of their focus and their passion. So now you're bringing in on-air personalities that don't really give a shit what the music format is, and that kind of I would think would contrast with the existing personnel that were all about the music.
And I think that was a challenge for everybody because, we were, there's a bunch of us, myself included, were music snobs, right? Like, we're just really cooler than thou music snobs. And so it was, really about the music. And so then you're trying to do this other thing, can cause some conflict. And I think there were people, it certainly speak for myself, that I was very vocal. I was very vocal about what was happening at the station and did not like it. And, I made a comment on the air and I got pulled into I think we talked about that before, that I got pulled into the office and chastised for saying, because I basically threw Madonna under the bus. It was the Thursday 30, and I said, I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe this. And I said, here's Madonna on the Thursday 30. Just with the scowling,
right.
I did that on the air, right? And it's like, I'm like, because it was disgusting. It was like, we don't play Madonna. But then you realize what I just done, and the next day is like, you can't do that, dude. I can't believe I had a job after that.
And people did quit, right? There are people who quit because of their disagreement over the direction of the music, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that definitely comes in the years that followed. There was a gradual progression of that, and I think everybody has their opinion of when was the end of the station. That's a funny thing.
Well, some people will say it's the day that David Marsden left the building.
And you know what, rightfully so. And everybody has their own right and opinion to that. And I think some people say that's when it ended. Some people say it was after that. Some people say when it was 88 when the station started goofing around playing Madonna. That was the end. So everybody has their opinion on that. So that's fair. Yeah.
And now that we're doing this like bonus CFNY Not episode, which I've done with who has been on those? Cam Gordon's been on those. I think maybe Brother Bill. We definitely brought in Ivor Hamilton as our subject matter expert here. Like, why are some bands played on CFNY and some not? And I will just say, I think it would have been interesting for me personally to hear Pixies songs back in '89. I'll just throw that out there. But hindsight's 2020. There's only room for so many cuts. So, Danny Kingsbury made a decision, which is what he's there for. He makes these calls. And in hindsight, it's easy to say, like, what the hell, you missed that, would have fit perfectly, whatever. But hindsight's 2020. You don't know what Pixies is going to become.
And there were other times, and Ivor and I have talked about this. There's other times the station that missed a band, didn't play it right away, or it took famously it took like 6 music meetings to have She Sells Sanctuary added to the station.
Wow.
And Ivor and
Ivor
especially was fighting for it, and I was fighting for it, and a bunch of other people, and it was just for whatever reason it dragged on in these music meetings, and we're going, my God, this track is amazing.
Yeah.
And it was just like, anyway, eventually got added. But that's the inside of it is sometimes people don't realize the fights that go on to something that seems so obvious.
So in your time at CFNY, if I put you on the spot here and said, what's the greatest miss? Is it Pixies? Like, what is the greatest miss in your time at CFNY? That's a tough one.
Well, Ivor talks about, we were late with Violent Femmes.
Yep.
That's a classic. The station did not play Violent Femmes out of the gate.
I feel like late at night, maybe you got added up or whatever, because I remember like the F-bomb.
Yeah, there was, I think after 9 o'clock that you could play the F-bomb version and that, but the station was late. It was, at some road shows that we started getting requests. And I remember being downtown at a party where a friend of mine, Ron Partridge, who was in the Toronto band, punk band Tirana, and I remember being at a party and he was telling me about this band, and I had never heard of them before, the Violent Femmes, and he was playing. He was like, and he was always a big music influence on me, and he was like, oh man. And I remember going back to the station too, going, hey,
yeah, like, why aren't we playing Blister in the Sun?
We got to play this band. Like, this is the coolest album. Anyway, eventually happened, but it was, so there were times, and I think there were other tracks and or albums that the station wasn't on right away, and didn't get right away.
They were late to the party.
But they're few and far between. In a lot of cases, the station, as everybody knows, broke a lot of music, not only in Toronto and area, but in Canada and North America was the first to break so many artists and songs.
Well, enough about lowest at the low. Okay. So I'm going to read a question that came in for you that's kind of related to CFNY Not, this theme we have. Then I'm going to give you some gifts, Scott, because you came a long way to be here. And then we're going to get serious for a moment.
Okay, sure.
Because we can do that on this program.
Okay.
MW writes in, Scott, how did West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys become a hit first in Toronto? Now, I haven't done any, Scott, this is me talking now. I haven't done any corroboration research to confirm that that's actually the case. But MW, sounds like MW knows what they're talking about. Possibly West End Girls from the Pet Shop Boys is first a hit here. Do you have any insight into that?
Only this was, I think, just before I worked at the station. But I think, again, this is about, I would say, predominantly imports. That the station was rare as a non college station. This is a commercial radio station,
Right.
that was actively playing imports, and at the disdain of the local Canadian record companies. That wasn't the greatest relationship to sort of navigate that. But anyway, it was part of what the station did. And Ivor was had the import show. That's where a lot of these tracks started, got their first play. And then they would be brought up in the music meetings, and sometimes it would get into regular rotation.
You should have recorded those meetings. That should be a podcast series.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Wow.
You're right. So I think that was just one of the imports that it was like, hey, this is pretty cool. It's simply a matter of, this is a cool record, let's play it. There was no history. It was their very first single. It wasn't a history of like, oh, it's the new Pet Shop Boys, we better play the Pet Shop Boys. It was like, there's this new band, they sound really cool. They got a kind of electro, Depeche Mode, New Order kind of feel going on, and that's a big part of our sound, and that's a cool sound right now. But it was also a great record, obviously.
Sure.
And stands, the test of time today. But yeah. And I think it was a small independent label. I don't think it was a big label either. And that's another thing that the station didn't care whether it was on a big label or not. It was just let's listen, let's play the record and add it or not.
Love it. And it's funny to me that this is the second episode of the last 3 episodes where West End Girls by Pet Shop Boys was referenced, because we were playing. Do you remember the Canadian girl group West End Girls? Do you have any?
Yes.
Are You
they from
Sexing Me?
Vancouver? Isn't
Are You Sexing Me? I think was the big single.
Are they BC group?
So we played it on FOTM Cast.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they're BC or not, but they might be. But we played them on FOTM Cast. Ken Gordon wanted to talk about Forgotten CanCon, and we were playing it. And then I started singing West End Girls by Pet Shop Boys. So it's twice in 3 episodes that song's been referenced. Okay, my friend, I mentioned we're going to get serious, but first I'm going to give you some gifts because you came a long way. This here, Scot Turner, is a wireless speaker. What you dropped there was your Ridley Funeral Home measuring tape.
Oh, we'll get to that in a second.
Well, give it to you right now since you picked it up there. So that's courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home. They have a great podcast called Life's Undertaking. And it's Brad Jones and I, and it's every 2 weeks, and it's great, but I want to listen. Measure stuff.
Yeah, thank you for this. I wanted to listen to that episode, or there's a series of episodes about
3.
the most requested songs at funerals. I would love to listen to that. In
fact, yes, you're right. So we did 3 chapters of the most popularly requested funeral homes at Ridley Funeral Home. And I was surprised to hear that End of the Road by Boyz II Men is not one of them. Okay, that's my surprise. But it was so successful that we're going to do top 10 and do it on Toronto Mic'd. So I do urge you to listen to that's the for real heads. You got to listen to the 3 episodes of Life's Undertaking, but there will be a Toronto Mic'd episode with Brad Jones where we kick out the 10 most popular funeral songs since he arrived there in the late 80s.
Okay, good.
That's happening. But with that wireless speaker,
yes, thank you.
You're going to listen to season 6 of Yes, We Are Open. Al Grego went to Banff, Alberta, and he visited Ken McMurdo, the owner of Mountain Chocolates. Ken started his business in 1989, around the time Humble and Fred was formed. And he basically, this is a time when Banff was beginning to grow and it became a tourist attraction. But
cool.
There have been disruptions to the tourism, including a pandemic we just went through. And now there's inflation and supply chain issues. So Al talks to these small business owners to find out how they're managing, how they cope. It's really interesting. So Yes, We Are Open is the name of the podcast, and you should subscribe and listen. And while you're subscribing to podcasts and listening on your new wireless speaker from Moneris, you should subscribe to the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada, hosted by Chris Cooksey. Great insight and tips for you, whether you manage your own. Now that you're retired, you might have somebody managing your financial investments, or maybe you do it yourself. Regardless, the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James is for you, my friend. Also, recyclemyelectronics.ca. That's where you go if you have old electronics, old cables, old devices that you need to dispose of. You don't throw that in the garbage. You go to recyclemyelectronics.ca where you can drop them off and have them properly recycled so the chemicals do not end up in our landfill. And last but not least, this is very interesting. This book here, Scott.
Yes.
That's the history of Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. There was Toronto Maple Leafs baseball before there was Toronto Maple Leafs hockey.
Yes,
okay, this is they are playing at their home games at Christie Pitts, Christie and Bloor.
Yeah.
No ticket required. The home opener is May 12, and I'm telling you, we've got Rick Emmett coming from Burlington. We got Who's coming? Stephen Brunt from Hamilton. I mean, Wendell Clark is going to be there. I mean, it's going to be fantastic.
Nice.
We're hoping to get Biff Naked there. There's we got Hebsy and Pagan and Mike Eppel and Peter Gross and just a cast of great FOTMs coming out to the home opener on May 12th. And I'll be recording live from Christie Pitts. So you can drop by, say hi.
Very cool.
Get on the mic. So, Scott, that's a long drive for you, but I'm happy to invite you to... Well, I was going to say I invite you to TMLX 15. I do want to invite you to that.
What's the date on that? Because I haven't been
June
to
27. Oh, Scott.
See, I'm trying to see if I'm going to be around.
So June,
I think so, yeah.
It's also my 50th birthday.
Oh,
so June 27
fantastic.
from 6 to 9 p.m. This is TMLX 15. It's at Great Lakes Brewery, Southern Etobicoke campus, down the street from the Costco here in Southern Etobicoke. Everyone's invited.
Excellent.
Just come out.
50th. Look at that. I should be here.
You better be there. I want you to be there because Palma Pasta is going to feed you. They'll have a nice vegetarian meal for you. I know you're still vegan?
Yes,
Good
still.
for you.
That's 35 something years now. Yeah.
Okay, so there will be a vegan meal for you from Palma Pasta, and your first beer is on the house, courtesy of the host,
Excellent.
Great Lakes Brewery. So, okay, my friend, let's get serious for a moment. I am sorry. My sincere condolences. Your mom just passed away.
Yes, 87. It was a week shy of her 88th birthday. But a life well lived, right? And she, so this will be tough. But anyway, yes. So she was ready for it. And I think I had messaged you on this, is that I had listened to the show that you produced, the Humble and Fred radio show. It's maybe, I can't remember when it was, maybe a year ago.
Can I shout out a listener of Toronto Mike named Steve Hagee?
Yeah.
Who is the person who reached out to me and said, I work with this organization. And this was basically an episode. I wanted to do this episode because Humble and Fred were kind of talking about end of life and MAID and stuff. And this was an expert on MAID.
Yeah.
And you heard that episode of Humble and Fred?
Yeah. So I had heard that, and I really found it compelling. And I'd heard something like it before, but I hadn't really heard the details of it and what it was called and how they do that and how it was. I'd heard, in Europe, it was a little more common, but it was something that's coming into Canada or becoming more prominent, or people at least talking about
it's legalized.
Yeah. And so, and I've always thought, wow, that would be for me. And that's how I thought first. I thought that's how I want to go. If I get, really sick, or, there's not much I can do anymore, or there's things like dementia, which is happening more and more to so many people. So I remember talking to my sister, and my mother had just in the last couple of years just started to get weaker, physically, and she was getting a bit of dementia. So my mom, there's so many different, I took a course on this. There's so many different levels of dementia. And there's one particular where you start seeing things. And my mother very matter of factly would just go, oh, there they are, those people in the trees, Scott, and they're ropes. And then I look out the window and you kind of go, well, I know you see them, but I don't see them. But yeah, and she's like, "Oh yeah, yes they are." Yeah, da, da, da. Anyway, so she just last few years she'd just becoming weaker and weaker, and getting very frustrated about it. She kind of got to the point where she was starting to say things like, "Oh, I'm ready to go. Take me away." And when things like she would fall or something like that. And I remember talking to my sister saying, I heard this Humble and Fred program, and they had somebody on talking about MAID. And what do you think about it? And maybe we should talk to Mom about it. And so we had this conversation, and so my sister talked to my mother, and we just started the whole process and getting her ready for that day. And it just came up sooner than we thought. We thought, it was going down that road, but then I was away actually in Costa Rica when my sister had called, and my mom had just had a bad week, and she was like, I just want to go. And she had already had one doctor. You have to get certain approvals.
Right.
And so she was like, get the doctor here as soon as possible. She's done. She's done, wants to go. And so it was just and I remember saying to my sister, I said, can you ask Mom if she can wait till like Tuesday? Because, it's like trying to get a flight back right now is crazy. And then at first my mom said, okay. And then my sister called back saying, no, you have to come right away. And I said, okay, I can get there Saturday. And then it was like, and then so we could do this on Sunday. And I said, but that's St. Patrick's Day. Now my mother's Scottish, and I didn't know, kind of what that, I think as far as I know, the Scottish and the Irish love each other. There's no problem there. But I just thought, I said to my sister, I go, can just check with my mother just to say, hey, this would be on St. Patrick's Day. Is there any problem with that? Just to be sure, right?
Right.
And it was like, no. She doesn't care, wants to go. And so, I had to get back, and so we did it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. They come to your home, they come to wherever you are, and you say you're there, all the loved ones are around, and you say some final things. And my mom was even joking, and we played some songs and did some dancing, and it's quite an experience. I've never done that before. It's a funny analogy. I've done it with a dog, but and I thought that was fantastic that you can be there with your. A lot of people love their pets and their dogs, and you can do it like that. But it's not, not to compare the two. Yeah, it is. And anyway, so and it's just it's. I really do think, and my mother physically, she got to the point where she could not do anything herself physically. Everything she had to be helped to have that done. And so it was time. And I totally respect that.
I respect it as well. And hearing you tell the story of, St. Patrick's Day 2024, you get back from Costa Rica, where you went after your retirement.
I was going to be in Costa Rica for like a month and a half, and that got cut short for obvious reasons. So,
but hearing you describe it, like playing your favorite music, having that that farewell, and then that exit, that gentle exit, it sounds so civilized to me, and it sounds so beautiful. And then you mentioned, what we do with our pets, and it's like we love our pets so much that there's a point in almost every pet owner's life when they realize that they need final meal. I know Rudy in our family, Rudy the dog, got the final meal, the burger from McDonald's, and then gently, you have a goodbye, hugs, and then gently, Rudy goes away without any pain. And, you'd think we'd offer this same, just the same sweet exit to those we love who are, human beings. And what you did for your mom there sounds very beautiful to me.
It really was. And I would, it's obviously not for everybody. And there's obviously for religious reasons for some people, whatever that might be. So it's not for everybody, but I absolutely think it's the right thing. And I think in the right situation, absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
And I remember because the woman who spoke from MAID wanted to make sure that Humble and Fred weren't going to have fun with this. Like this was going to be treated delicately and sensitively. And I know I had many conversations with, I think they had people actually, and I was talking to their people about it to say no, like, and I remember telling Humble Fred, you're not allowed to make any jokes. Like this is a real talk here. And the fact that you heard that and it resonated with you makes me feel very, very good because those guys might enjoy lots of poo and pee and
fart jokes.
Yeah, but once in a while, through the crack in the concrete, this rose will grow. And look at how it affected your life personally. Worked for you and your mom. And again, I am sorry for your loss. Sounds like a great life, but even 87, you said?
87.
So it's like talking to you now, I'm saying, 87 is a good life, but when you get to 85, you might change your mind on that. But,
absolutely. Well, and the way things are going now, I mean, we've seen these, it's actually a shout out to Fred Patterson, a stat that I heard on the Humble and Fred show was just talking about that since 2018 till today, there's been a something like a 43% increase of the people living to 100 years in Canada. Like it's incredible. That's going on. Obviously, there's studies and things like dementia. We're seeing a lot of much more dementia in the world, and I think it's partly because people are living longer. We don't have these stats of people a couple of generations ago, people weren't living past 50 and maybe 60. And so what happens when all of a sudden everybody lives to, in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and now even hitting 100? And maybe these are the things we're seeing that we didn't realize the human body maybe is going to have these struggles as it lives longer. But hopefully they'll come up with some other solutions and cures for these things, hopefully, too. The other stat was, I think, that 1 in 4 Canadians in 2043, 1 in 4 Canadians will be over the age of 65.
Wow.
Anyway, something to think about.
No, absolutely something to think about. And just before I'm going to play a song and talk to you about someone else who has passed away this past month. Is there a story with your mom and or maybe it's a story about you in graduation?
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me just tell you this really quick story.
Yes, please.
Because there's the things you do as growing up, and you got parents, and sometimes you make them proud, and there's other times you don't, and at times you screw up, right? And times you get in trouble, times you get grounded. Does that still happen? Do you you've got kids, of course.
I got a 22-year-old, 20-year-old.
So let me ask you that question because I don't have kids, so I just wondered,
Sure.
like generationally speaking, I remember getting grounded. Like that's when you really got in trouble. So it was you either got grounded to your room and you couldn't go out and play or whatever it was. So what do you do now?
Nowadays, you take away the electronics. So because my son's got a Switch, a Nintendo Switch, and the punishment now is no Switch or any other Wi-Fi enabled device for the rest of the day.
I could see that being very powerful.
Very powerful.
Okay,
I rarely have to use it, and this is only with the younger two because the older two are too old for punishments anymore. They just you can be disappointed. That's the punishment.
See, and that's the same sort of thing because when you're grounded to your room was mean you couldn't get on the phone and you couldn't go out and
it is the
play.
same spirit. Like you basically strip them of all the privileges of life.
Right. So anyway, one of the things that my mom was most disappointed in me once was it was graduation. Now you have to just a little context to this that I was into punk music at the time. And I was even in a punk band with my friend Ron Partridge I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And our punk band was called Slime. And I think I was the drummer because I did play some guitar, but I think I was drummer at the time. So anyway, we're in this band Slime. So we're like into the Pistols and especially into the first Clash album, the Dead Boys, Vibrators, all this stuff. Just loving this stuff. Anyway, So for graduation, so my mother gets all dressed up, and then you got to understand that she's very, very proud. She sits in the audience with other mothers, and then there's on stage. I guess I'm getting some certificate or whatever it is, and
diploma.
Something. And there we are. And so from my head down, I'm dressed very nicely, and I don't know, some sort of tuxedo-y thing, whatever it was, but I had to be punk in some sort of way.
Right.
So instead of a nice pair of shoes, I had these torn up running shoes. The classic, what do you call it? What's the name of the
Converse All-Stars?
Yeah, the Chuck Taylors.
Chuck Taylors, yes.
Yeah, the classic Ramones white, and they were held together by safety pins. They had been so worn out, so that the only way I could, wear the shoes, there's safety pins in them, and they were just this horrific looking pair of running shoes on her son. And so, because she's saying that, she's looking at me, and then she just started kind of squinting her eyes, looking at me on stage, and she's like, and I wish I could do the Scottish accent, but she was like, "Oh my loving God," whatever it was. And she wouldn't talk to me for days after that. She felt so embarrassed. And meanwhile, all the other kids on stage thought I was the coolest, right? I was like high fives, and it was like, man, you're so cool. You're so cool. And then I get home, and it took her like days before she'd even speak with me.
And how was she with the alteration of your first name? Because moms care a lot about their son's first name.
It was kind of a meh thing with her. She's like, because
you're a radio guy.
Yeah, and I think by that time I'd done a lot of weird things in my life already.
Right. This is
including a career in radio. My dad was devastated because it's like, you're supposed to be a plumber, electrician, get a trade, son. And it was like, I'm going to be a radio DJ.
Right.
Horrified them. Yeah.
Oh, I enjoy hearing you tell stories about your mom, and I'm sorry.
Great sense of humor. She was joking to the end, and that's thank both my Scottish parents for giving me the Scottish sense of humor. It's one of the things, I guess I consider myself still half Scottish.
Sure.
The Scottish people have just some of the greatest sense of humor in the world.
J.R. Jim Reid has passed away. I'm sorry for your loss. I know you worked with Jim Reid. Would you mind sharing some stories, some memories of J.R.?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of his favorite artists. Jim was, I think I had mentioned this earlier when I came to the station. I was just this 24-year-old kid. He was, into his 30s and one of the more veteran DJs that I'd listened to. And he was one of the guys that influenced me and a style I wanted to emulate on the air, because I think he embodied that, that exact thing they will tell you about. Just talk to one person. And when a program director, they're teaching you in radio school, just pretend you're talking to one person and just be personable. And he had that. And I think even when I was trying to get my sound, I kind of overemphasized my voice maybe at times. And he was a guy that just and if you talk to him in person, it's just the same talk, the same style, the same pacing and everything. And it's he was really good at that, at just being natural. And so I think he's one of the prime examples of how you do that. Just be yourself and just don't push it, don't push your voice, don't put it on. They talk about being on. And he was just super kind, down to earth, a very giving in a helpful, constructive way in showing me what to do, what not to do, and just teaching me, what CFNY was all about, and the music, and how to be a CFNY DJ. So he showed me a lot. I listened to his show a lot. I was influenced, and you've got to remember back then, these early 80s, that and for a time that all the DJs on CFNY picked their own music. So when I was listening, he was on middays. He was just after
Pete and Geets.
Pete and Geets, yeah. So he was basically middays, 9 to 2 or 10 to 3 sort of thing. And so I'd listen to his show, and I would get ideas because I was still learning the music myself. So I'd listen, I'd write that down, go, I'm going to play that on my show. Oh, that's a cool track. Or, oh, I like that band. So that he was probably, his music choices were probably the closest to my choices on the station, if you will. So James, there was Pete and Geets, and they had their stuff, and then JR had a certain style of music he would play, and then James Scott in the afternoon, he got into a little more kind of jazz influence and Level 42 stuff, and I like some of that stuff too. But I think JR, what he played was, okay, that's going to be more like the Scot Turner show. So, he was very influential on me for sure.
I'm going to just play a little bit here. This is I had a compilation. There was a reunion. I want to say back in, I couldn't even guess when this was, 2007 or something like that. There was a CFNY reunion, and a CD was kind of given away as like with these clips in it. And a gentleman got me a copy, and this is on that copy of the CD. I'm going to just play this.
I listened to this this morning. Actually.
What we have here, my friends, is a failure to communicate. Oh, goodness me. Let's see if we can pick this up. Our compact disc player has just stopped live on the air. Jim has no record queued up. 3 minutes to go, and the news is coming on. And, well, let's just try and see. No, I don't even think it's going to come out.
Yeah,
well, maybe. How about a musical interlude? Maybe we could do something like that. You just hang on there, folks, as I reach over and do this. And let me see. What track can I play off here? This is one of the great things about working here. You can just play anything your little old heart pleases. And I think we'll just plunk that in there like that. And what track number is that? These are the compact discs. This is the intricate workings of the compact disc. So I reach over and press that. Press that. You see, you don't even have to cue these things up. And then all of a sudden, you just go magic like this and hope that it works. Yes, it is. Coming up at 12:30, Mike Stafford will be by.
That's classic Jim. And, you know, the struggles of anybody on the air when you've got something that fails like that and filling the time and the struggles of, you know, getting that next track on. That's a classic moment. You know, a couple things there is the compact discs. You know, the CFNY was one of the first stations to play CDs regularly on the air. And, you know, we were, let's do this. This is the new technology because we're all into new music and new things. And we got these early machines, and they were supposed to be indestructible. And the compact disc is this fantastic piece of technology that's flawless, and it was far from it. It took several generations of the discs and the machines before the skipping, and you had to clean them. Like, it was just, it's so frustrating. And they would skip or just stop. In that case, it just stopped. So feel the pain. And yeah, we went through that. Another funny, just a JR story is,
yes, please.
Was one of the things I discovered, and I'd been working there for some time until he actually told me, because I was probably in the studio with him, watching him choose his records. And I realized he kept on going to the same part of the library over the side of the room. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, he says, I'm on C right now. And I think Alan Cross referenced this too, is that he would just pick a letter and start and go through the C. Now, you had your current records, so that was sort of separate, you know, but when you go in to play your older tracks, you know, whether it was a couple of months old or a couple of years old. So when he was playing the older tracks, he would go to the C and go through the Cs. So and this was, I thought it was really cool, because you're really, you know, picking and choosing, and maybe you skip an album and you go, okay, I'll try and get this album on. And then he would go through the C's, and then he'd go on to the D's, and then go through the E's. But, you know, by the end of the show, he's only got so far. So tomorrow, we're going to pick up halfway through the D's, and then the day after, you might get to the E's. And then I realized, you know, that, well, what if you wanted to hear, you know, the Smiths or something? It's going to be like a week before you hear the Smiths on his show. Now, having said that, the good news is that JR played a lot of requests. Yeah, he took a lot of requests. He played a lot of requests, so somebody could, you know, request the Smiths. But he would he would actually go through the letters of the library, and he did that. Yes.
There's a problem, feathers on bargain buildings, weights and pulleys, feathers hit the ground before the weight can leave the air. Buy the sky and sell the sky and tell the sky and tell the sky.
Yeah, that's another JR pick, and I actually spoke to, I got the news last week, and this was and we were just talking about the MAID program. I'm not sure we mentioned that here, but that Jim decided to do the MAID program, which was on Friday, and say goodbye that way. And I had got the news from Ivor Hamilton about the turn of events with Jim. I had spoken to him a couple of months back, and I did not know he had leukemia. And he was very, very happy with his life, what he had done, where he was at. He was accepting of the cancer and didn't like the treatments. And he didn't directly tell me how long he had. He said that, there's a limited time, but I didn't realize it was going to be coming up so soon. And because I had said to him, I said, I'm going to be retiring just like Ivor, and I'm going away to Costa Rica for like a month and a half. And I said, when I come back, which is going to be like mid-April, let's get together for beers. We were going to do that. And then obviously things just escalated, and to the point that he took himself off the treatments, and he was in palliative care, and just he wanted to say goodbye. So I spoke to him the day before. He was in a good place, but I could tell he was sad too, because these days we just talk about age and that, right? Is 73 is it's not young, but it's youngish. In these times, right? That people are living into their late 80s and 90s more and more and more. So gone too soon, but I think that he's very proud of his CFNY days, and he's to a lot of people, that's how they know him. Obviously, he's done other things in his life, but that's certainly
Sure.
It was very influential to me, and it's just it's really sad. I was hoping to have some beers with him and tell some more stories.
I also did not know Jim Reid was ill, and never met the man, actually. But we were Facebook friends, and he would email me often, like when I had a CFNY episode or a band he liked or whatever. I'd get these nice notes. And on the live stream right now is a gentleman who goes by the handle Basement Dweller, and I included this tidbit. I dropped like 45 minutes of Jim Reid on CFNY as a tribute just a couple of days ago in the Toronto Mike feed. And I mentioned in that episode that I would get notes from Jim Reid about how much he loved comments on the TorontoMike.com blog that were left by Basement Dweller. And he said that the Basement Dweller belonged in the penthouse, not the basement. So and I would have this correspondence of Jim Reid. And I got this sad news. I found out after he passed that Jim was no longer with us, and I was very sad. And I have some notes in here from FOTMs regarding Jim Reid, colleagues of yours. In that clip I played where Jim Reid's CD player broke, and he's trying to figure out what to do. At the very end, you hear him say, "Coming up next, Mike Stafford," because I guess the news was on in 3 minutes, and Mike Stafford was going to do the news on CFNY. Also on FOTM, Mike Stafford, as you know. But Mike Stafford writes, walked into the Master Studio in January 1986 to advise JR that the shuttle Challenger had just exploded. He faded down the Van Morrison, and we talked on air about the tragedy without, of course, knowing many details. I don't know how he did it, because he was sitting across from me all the while. As we ended the special report, JR brought the volume up for live on TV. You can watch them die by the box. Very strong, in my humble opinion, but a few listeners called in to complain. Rest in peace, my friend. So there's a little Mike Stafford JR story from January 1986. And Rob Pruce.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be back here, by the way, I think in about a week for an episode of Toast with Bob Willett. Rob Pruce writes in, I did my very first radio interview with JR back in the summer of 1981. I'm about to transfer the old cassette too. Gord Depp and I went to Brampton to visit CFNY for the first time on Jim's show,
Cool.
Cooking with Guests.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I should mention too that Jim, we did have Jim interviewed for the documentary.
I was going to ask if he's on, if he's going to be in the doc.
In it. He's in it, and he's great.
Wow.
He tells one of the many stories, but he tells some insight to one of the crazy moments in the station's history. So he's very, very good, and he tells the story very well. So we're really proud and happy that we were able to get him
Absolutely.
for the documentary. So you'll see JR in there.
Oh, I'm glad. I was going to ask you if we're going to see JR in the new CFNY documentary. FOTM Leslie Cross, who joined us for episode 1021, wrote in, I remember that JR was a joy. Every workday morning of my life from 1983 until I left in 1988. So to a T, I've only heard great things about JR, and he will be missed. You sent in one more song. I'd like to kind of
If you do that really quickly, yeah, sure.
Just a little bit here.
Yeah, this is an example just of one of the songs I remember Jim playing a lot on his show and going, yeah, I like this style, I like this kind of music, and playing this song on my show like later, I would like, you're going to play that one. But Lotus Eaters, First Picture of You, great classic CFNY song.
It's warm in and out, the pulse of flowing love. Spread the calm to meet the others. Pleasure fills with love till dawn. It's warm in and out, the call for sacred hours. There's a chant of newborn singing, the magic force of your feelings. The first picture of you, the first picture of someone, seeing the flowers scream their joy.
First Picture of You, great song. Oh, I should mention too that another shout out to nythespirit.com that Ivor is going to do a tribute to Jim and play some of this music. He's got a playlist that Jim had. I think Jim shared his playlist with Ivor, so he's going to play some of that music. That'll be, I think, if you're catching this podcast today, it's at 7 o'clock tonight. That's the 17th. But it will repeat Sunday at 4 o'clock. And I think David Marsden had done a tribute on Friday as well. And that's probably being repeated if you want to check the nythespirit.com website. I'm sure it's on there.
Beautiful tribute to JR. Thanks, Scott, for doing this. And again, sorry for your loss. You had to say goodbye to your mom and then saying goodbye to her.
Another CFNY legend. And, James Scott was not that long ago, too. We lost another there, too. And, speaking of health and such, it's a quick segue to you is that I haven't been listening to all of your podcasts, so there may have been an update.
I am prolific, Scott.
There may have been an update on, your little scare, and I think it was a blood clot or a potential...
Blood clot on the brain.
So where's that story?
Okay, so the quick update is the blood clot on the brain. I was, I spent overnight in the stroke ward at St. Joe's because a stroke was possibly imminent. Is that a contradiction? Anyway, immediately they stick you full of blood thinners and you get put on these blood thinners because they got to thin your blood. This is how they prevent these blood clots. And long story short is I never had a stroke. This is good news. And I did have like a 6-week headache because my brain apparently experienced this trauma, but then my brain absorbed this blood clot. So my brain absorbed the blood clot.
Right.
The blood clot went away. Then they took me off the blood thinners because I didn't test positive for anything that causes. They have all these tests, and I did all these tests with a hematologist, and they said, okay, you're negative for all the tests.
Yeah.
So we're going to take you off blood thinners. Like maybe it was just like 1 in a million bad luck or whatever. But then shortly thereafter, I got another blood clot, but not in the brain this time, in the right arm.
Oh, wow.
So then they said, okay, we don't have a test for what you have, but you have something that causes blood clots. So you are now on these blood thinners indefinitely. And twice a day I pop a pill. It is called, I want to get the right, Apaxaban, okay? So it's called Apaxaban, and every morning and every evening I have an alarm. It literally plays Neil Young's Heart of Gold on my phone, and I pop the pill. So now I've been doing it for so long, it's just part of life that I pop this pill every morning, every night. It's the only medication I'm on. It thins my blood. I am asked, don't cut yourself. Don't cut yourself. Don't crash your bike. Don't play contact sports because you can bleed internally because you got very thin blood. But I feel fantastic. and I'm going to ask you about your cycling now, so this is a good segue, but I've been biking more than ever. I feel great, and I just pop these pills and try not to crash my bike. And so far, so good. How's your cycling going?
Well, thanks for that update. That's great news in that I'm on a very, just the 81 milligrams of aspirin a day, which is a blood thinner too, but not, I guess, to that level. But that's a precaution thing because of my...
Because your heart attack.
Yeah, because of my family history. It's all family history.
But you never had the heart attack, right?
No.
They got the quadruple bypass.
Yeah, so it was, I did not have a heart attack, but I had really bad blockages,
right.
And this was family history, and I was out cycling, and I was just something didn't feel right.
You were tired or something.
Yeah, it just wasn't right. I was still finishing the rides, but I was like, something's not right, and just went for a series of tests, and eventually they took me in for that angiogram in the hospital, which is like the gold standard of, we're going to see what's really going on there. And they rolled me out and said, oh, wow. You're like, you had one at 90%, one blockage at 90%, two arteries were at 80%, one was at 50%. So there's a special that day, I think, that we did 4 instead of,
well, good on you for listening to your body. How many guys out there ignore their body?
Exactly. Oh yeah, no, and you have to, as you get older, you get smarter, and you just pay attention to things. So, so it's, the family history that my liver just, this is one of the things I learned. I thought like cholesterol was like from eating fatty foods, and it's like, no, about 75% of the cholesterol is created by your liver in your body. And, there's a certain percentage of cholesterol you actually need to talk about brain function and all that stuff. Right. Anyway. So, so I'm on a statin, which is the kind of the, standard cholesterol reducing medication, because my liver just loves to make cholesterol. And so, and again, I was like vegan for 30 years when this happened.
And cycling up a storm.
So it was like, I was one of...
You're not overweight. You're very thin.
I could be better, but thank you.
I don't know where you'd be better. But
yeah. But anyway, so so I have to be... I just have to take this medication. I really do.
So we're in similar boats. You're a few years ahead of me, but basically science has come to a point where we can do long rides and feel great. We just got to pop a pill. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yes, right? Yes. And so, and like hopefully many, many, many years ahead with the help of medication sometimes. I'm not a big, medication fan, but sometimes there's certain cases you need it and you have to.
Absolutely. Right? No one's I don't know. Are there people who are fans of medications? It's like, I don't want to be on a Paxaban twice. First of all, it really means I can never really sleep in, because if it's a Saturday and I had a late night, my alarm's going off at 9:30 a.m. Neil's going to be singing, and apparently at this drug I'm on, you have to take it at the same time every day. You can't play games and have it a few hours later or whatever. So I'm glad I can just pop the pill, but no one's a fan of medications, right? Yeah,
true. But anyway, I'm a big fan. I'm a fan of watching your cycling. I was just saying.
I want to talk to you about so. Again, this is the mutual admiration moment, because we're going to talk cycling, and then we're going to segue over to Ivor and Scott's podcast project. I have a lot of questions. Like, you continue your praise of me, of course. I think before we press record, there were many compliments you wanted to pay, and I said, save it for the podcast. And I don't think we got to any of them, Scott. But now is the time to say, I'm inspiring you and you're inspiring me.
Yeah. Well, just for those that don't know about Strava, talk about different apps and stuff. I don't think we talked about this before, because if you're not just a cycling fan, but if you're a fitness fan, Strava is awesome. Mm-hmm. I don't have there's a paid one.
Well, I don't pay for it either.
No, yeah. But their basic one.
Here's your lunch ride I'm looking at right
yesterday.
So you're my friend on Strava, and you did... Is that 50K?
50K yesterday with about 470 meters of climbing. So that's for my level, that's pretty good effort,
Great. 50K. What percentage of people listening now have done a 50K ride over in the past year? Let's say. Bottom line is, good for you. You do longer rides than I do. The time thing. Like, my last ride was yesterday. Ride to Ontario Place, and it was 30.77
which is great. That's a good ride. But the thing that's so impressive about Toronto Mike is like how many kilometers you are out every day. And I was going to ask, because today when we were recording this, it was raining, and so you must go out in the rain, because I'm not going out. I knew I was out like 3 days, and then I'm not going to be out today. I probably won't be out tomorrow because I think it's going to rain. So do you go out? You must go out in the rain.
Yeah, I just called up my spreadsheet where I import all my Strava stuff, so I can tell you. This is boring a lot of people, but we are going to get to the podcast talk with Scott.
Yeah, we will.
I think my brother's I was going to do an episode all about cycling in Toronto, and my brother, who listens to every episode, said, Just so you know, Mike, that'll be the episode I skip, the first episode I skip, and I realize, oh yeah, like sometimes it's too much about me, but you know, it is called Toronto Mike.
You should do one just as like that, and I'll have me on it, and then honestly, we'll get like 10 listeners, but it'll be fun. It'll be so much fun.
Let's do it. So I can tell you, here we are, a little bit more than halfway through April, and so far in 2024, I am at 2,873 kilometers.
Amazing.
So that's some cold. There were some cold weeks, although it was a pretty mild winter. But for a frame of reference, last year I did over 12,000 kilometers. So 2023 was the first year in which I averaged over 1,000 a month. And when I say that now, and I'm looking at it now,
incredible.
It is
really
incredible. And I don't know how, because there was a time in my life where I didn't know how will I ever hit 1,000 in a month. Like that was kind of and then I did. Yeah. And then I realized, when the weather's decent, it's easy to hit 1,000 kilometers. Yeah. And now I can average one throughout the year. So this is kind of a not even a humble brag. I guess it's just a brag that I do get out almost every day, and I don't care too much about how cold it is or how wet it is. I will skip the odd day when it's a combination, and today might be a day like that. This is the only combo I don't like biking in. Cold and wet. Yeah. I don't mind if it's freezing, -20. I don't mind if it's snowing. I don't mind if it's 45 degrees Celsius. I don't mind if it's rainy and warmer. I don't like it when it's like between 0 and like 8 degrees and it's rainy. That is the only condition I don't like.
I'd rather have the snow, right? Yeah.
I'll take -20 wind chill and get out there. So today might be a day like that, because it was like when I walked the kids to school, it was rainy and like 3 degrees, or felt like 3 degrees down here at the lake effect. And this might be one of those days I take a pass, because I don't want to be wet and cold on the rides. I don't enjoy it. And I'm out there to enjoy it. But
fair enough.
You do these long rides, and I do follow you on Strava, and I get inspired by your bike riding, Mr. Scot Turner.
It's been a few years since I've done the longer rides, but I hope to do some, 70, 80 K rides, and maybe I might even do 100 K this summer, a couple of those. But I find after 80, I just want to go home. It's not fun anymore.
Same here. I can easily, like 60 is easy. I'll do a 60, and if I have time, I'll do a 60, and I can, but once I get like beyond 70, sometimes I get a little pinched nerve in my back right here.
Everything starts hurting.
And I'm like,
it's not fun.
Like 60 is sort of like, let's just keep it to 60 and under so I can enjoy it. Okay, so we've talked cycling. Let me check mark that.
Excellent.
Podcasting. So you're now retired from, you're not really retired. You know what you are, Scott? You're retired from terrestrial radio 9 to 5 job.
There you go.
Okay.
Fair enough.
But you're not done working, because you're, you make time for your cycling and your personal projects and stuff. But it sounds like you're going to launch a podcast with Ivor Hamilton. Yeah.
So just on podcasting, just what you've done, by the way, the fact that you have a show almost every day, I think, with few exceptions, and just the number of I've got. That's another thing. I'll have more time now to catch up on podcasts and some of the people, some of the guests you've had over the just
Ben Johnson is here Monday.
Oh, fantastic! You keep surprising and it's from all kinds of different areas where there's just like, oh wow, he got so and so. It's like, oh my god, and so and so's talking, and you're getting a lot of firsts of people talking to you, which is fantastic, because the word gets out that you're just real. Like real talk, you're just down to earth, down in the basement, just telling it like it is.
We're just chatting,
and and you're giving people the opportunity just to tell their stories and tell everything they need to tell or haven't told.
Somebody has to dive deep into why weren't the Pixies played on CFNY in 1989? And if I don't do it, who's going to do it, Scott?
There you go. Exactly. So anyway, great what you're doing. And plus, from you being, obviously, you've been a big fan of media, radio, and you're archiving all this stuff. And I think you've said that before yourself, that, part of this is that, so there's a record of this information
100%.
That's going to exist, right? So that's a really wonderful thing you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of everybody and
you're a big part
Toronto
of it.
History, thank you for all you're doing for Toronto. That's why you're called Toronto Mike, right?
Thank you, man.
So we talked about this a couple of years ago about podcasts, and my idea of it was just to be a musical podcast, and I think it related to what I love to do as my sort of hobby, my possessive hobby that I have of doing these this day in history,
which I love,
on this day posts. Yeah,
and that's where the Doolittle anniversary tidbit. Like I was going to do Pixies on CFNY, and then I know you're coming over today, and I'm checking in on my social media, and I see Scot Turner's got another one of his great posts, and you said it was the anniversary of Doolittle, and it blew my mind because I had already loaded up a song from that album to talk. Like it was such a convergence.
I didn't know that. It's cool. Yeah.
Complete coincidence. And I learned that from you. And I learned the on this day in history posts from Scot Turner. years ago I told you those are
Yes.
great. That should be a
You did.
podcast.
And yes, to your point, you were the one that suggested
But you
that.
still won't buy me a lunch. And Ivor and you are going to pay for Humble and Friends lunch, but I'm not getting any lunch.
No, we're going to do that. We're going to do that, and we're going to talk to you more about that. But you know what? You're right. You're the one that said you should do that into a podcast. And I said I thought about it, but no, because you can't play music. And then it's been this whole gray area that's kind of.
But what are they going to do? Arrest you?
Yeah, that's what
Like,
I mean.
you know what they
So
can do?
now
I
it's
can
like,
tell you
fuck
because I
it,
live.
We're playing music.
Yeah, 'cause I live in this world. Okay.
Yeah.
I just played 3 songs that I don't have
Yeah.
a license to play.
There you
okay?
go.
This is the worst they can do to you, and you have to be prepared for this.
Yeah.
They can deplatform you. This is the worst they can do.
okay.
So, I got paid sponsors. It's kind of important I'm on Spotify because so many, I don't know why. Spotify is a terrible podcast aggregator, but there are a lot of people who listen to podcasts on Spotify. So, it is important that I have a presence on Spotify for those people, right? Spotify is the tricky one, but they could all get on board tomorrow. Like, we don't know what the future holds.
Sure.
But if Spotify is like, Mike, you played REM, you can't be doing that. You're deplatformed, which means they basically delete your show from being indexed by Spotify.
Yeah.
That is literally the worst they can do to you.
Right. Okay.
As far as I'm concerned.
Then-
So that is a risk. But if you're starting a new podcast with Ivor Hamilton, I think that's a risk you should take.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, so we're going to do it anyway. So music has to be a part of it, but essentially, it's your idea first, Toronto Mike. Do a podcast around these, on this day. So musical, history, anniversaries, and milestones. So because I've got the research anyway, I do it every day. So that's part of it. The other thing too is I think we're going to kind of OG. Ivor and I were the originators of Live in Toronto. We started that show, and I think we're going to kind of look at that and do, because we did on concert history, Toronto concert history. We did that on Live in Toronto. So I think we can do that in the podcast. And Ivor, as you know, has been to so many concerts over the years. He's got this great, reference of shows he's been to.
And he's got half of the vinyl that CFNY discarded when they went to those faulty CD players.
Yes, right. The faulty CD players. Oh, man, I remember those things.
Let me just tell you this. I endorse this project 100% because I just want to be able to hear you and Ivor basically now when I need to hear this, I got to invite you guys into my basement and do like a 2-hour episode like I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
But I would love to have regular access to you and Ivor talking about when, let's say, 35th anniversary of Doolittle, let's say, being released. And you were there, and he's got a perspective from the label side in 89. You were at CFNY in 89. You can talk about kind of what we talked about today, which is trying to get Pixies on the CFNY playlist and where they were in transition and everything. I can't wait to subscribe to this podcast. Does it have a name?
No, it doesn't. So we're looking for ideas. We and we're still loosely talking about it right now. And we don't know. We haven't even talked about whether it's going to be maybe 1 a week or maybe 2 a week. I don't know about. I can't do five a week. No, but we got to work that out. Different aspects of it too. We might do some birthdays again with the music, all music based. That sort of thing.
I love this.
But I think, doing from concerts and that, and the cool perspective that Ivor has is, he's got that CFNY history that he worked from the earliest days of CFNY to like the mid 80s. And then, he worked at a huge record company for so many years. So he's got all this insight of, what happened. Why did this release?
Why did Bon Jovi get the banner at the Canada Center?
Yeah. And why was that a single and this wasn't a single? And why, what happened to this album? Why wasn't that album released?
And fuck boot sauce.
Yeah. I think I remember that story. Yeah.
He'd love to hear that. Okay, so I'm just here to say that any way I can help, I'm here because selfishly, I just want this podcast to exist.
Yes. So we'll chat.
You're both sweethearts. Sweetheart FOTM. So
thank you. Well, and part of it too, as I said earlier, is that part of it came out of with the CFNY documentary. We know that there's pieces missing. There just wasn't time or certain details. You can't get really, really deep on the details. So that's that podcast.
Well, as executive producers, let's say somebody, I don't know who, somebody was interviewed. Let's say Geets Romo gets interviewed, and for whatever reason it ends up on the cutting room floor. Like, will you have permission to use excerpts from conversations that are not in the final documentary?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, that's to me. That's
don't hold me to that quote, but I believe so.
I can't hold you to anything. What am I going to do? Lorne Honickman, do we have a suit on our hands here? He lied to me in podcasts. I love the idea. I think you and Ivor will be great together. And now that you both have time to focus on this, it could be something very special. And it is something that is, I would say, needed. We need the independent voice in this, Canada's largest city, the largest market. You and Ivor can fill in some of those gaps that I'm craving personally. And there's other people like me who are craving it. And the synergies here, I can't wait to talk it up. And I wish you luck. And along the way, again, it's the kind of show I wish I could produce, right? But you and Ivor, however you're going to end up doing this, these are conversations we can have.
Yes, we need to talk, and that's why we're still in the early stages of putting this all together. And that I think the other thing too is that the other part of this too, I think I might have said this to you last one of our previous podcasts, was that part of this research that I've done, that then if you don't follow me and you want to see this stuff, because it's really cool, it's a great journey back to some memories. But on Facebook, I'm on there, and I do them also on Twitter, X. So just at Scot
and I get
Turner.
them in both places. So I get the double hit, and I can't miss anything.
There you go.
So.
But part of this was I was just building a playlist for myself. I was just like, I want to just catalog, and I do this all on a spreadsheet to catalog all these songs and when they were released and that. So I was building my own playlists. And I think what I've discovered for me, and that's why I did it for me originally, was there's like, I forgot about this song. Oh my God, I forgot about this song, particularly from CFNY, and these songs that, the station played, nobody else played. And so you forget about them.
As a guy who wasn't there, so like I'm not listening to CFNY in 1985, for example, because I'm listening to Tom Rivers on CFTR, okay?
Yeah.
It's just a fact.
Yeah.
And I'm very honest about where I'm at. But as a fan of the station in later years, and a guy who's passionate about the history of the city, the history of the city's radio and television, everything. Yeah. I'm very interested in hearing discussions about the Spirit of Radio era that I might not have been there for because I was, busy listening to George Michael on or Maestro Fresh West on CFTR, and I love hearing about the history from people who were there, and that's you guys.
The other part too, just last thing, is that it's not going to be, this podcast with the Ivor and I that we're going to do is not going to be all about CFNY. We're going to we're going to get into music and other.
Well, CFNY never played banjo. Oh, did they during that little period? In
maybe, yeah. I think probably, right? Yeah, probably. So yeah, if
taking it back.
If there's a history date and an album that makes sense, that was impactful, maybe he was a huge commercial selling success, but a piece of shit artistically, we'll talk about it. Whatever, floats our boat, I suppose, right? We'll have fun.
It's all about having fun and getting that information from your noggin and Ivor's noggin into a quality, high-fidelity recording, so forever our great-grandkids can access it and fill in the gaps. And then I could be here to report back and you won't believe what I learned on the Ivor and Scot show. It's did you know that CFNY refused to play this artist because of whatever, all that fun stuff.
Just need a name.
If anyone has a good name, send it to mike@torontomike.com, and I will take full credit for it. Thank you very much. Scot Turner, always a pleasure. I think when you're coming over, I'm like, this will be like whatever. This will be a 90-minute episode. I'm here to report back to you that we have cleared the 2-hour mark.
Oh, no, you're kidding.
I don't know why you say all no. Like it was good shit.
I know. I had fun.
If you were the documentary, if you were the director of this chat, what would you cut?
Nothing.
No. So thank you. And that's why I don't do any edits, because if I could just in real time I can tell you if it's shit, and I'm like, we're gonna move on because this sucks. It was all killer, no filler.
Yes.
Thank you, Scot Turner. Enjoy your retirement.
Thank you, Toronto Mike.
Don't work too hard in your retirement, okay? And that brings us to the end of our 1,472nd show.
Woo!
Remember, Scot is Scot Turner with one T in Scott, and you can find him again on Facebook, and he's on the app formerly known as Twitter. I'm also on Twitter and Blue Sky as @TorontoMike. I'm all over the place.
We're both on Strava, too. Look for us on Strava.
Toronto Mike and Scot Turner are on Strava, and we both have unique names. So Scott's got one T. You can find them very easily. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. I'll be at the GLB Brew Pub on Thursday to hang out with Joe Bowen. He's got a new lager. Go Leafs Go. Palma Pasta. They'll feed us at TMLX 15 on June 27. Be there. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Raymond James Canada. They've got the Advantaged Investor podcast. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team Come out May 12. Hang out with me at Christie Pitts. Tickets are on me. Maneris, they've got Yes We Are Open Season 6 dropping now. And Ridley Funeral Home. See you all. Gotta go to my thing. Who's next? Hold on. Who's next, Scott? Do you know?
Just who's on Monday?
I've got it here. Friday is the exit interview for somebody who's retiring from the Toronto Star after many, many, many years of covering sports. Mark Swolinski.
Wow.
He's making his Toronto Mike debut, his exit interview, and he's going to set the table for Ben Johnson on Monday. See you all then.
Shades of gray, 'cause I know that's true, yes I do.